In this video, we're breaking down 3 hours of disturbing Simpsons facts you can fall asleep to. Let's get started. First up, we've got the murder of Phil Hartman and the character Springfield lost forever. If you've ever watched The Simpsons and wondered what happened to Troy McClure, the washed-up actor who introduced himself by saying, "You may remember me from such films as," whatever ridiculous title the writers came up with that week. Or what happened to Lionel Hutz, the incompetent lawyer who once argued a case while eating a sandwich and losing? The answer is not a creative decision. The answer is that the man who voiced them was murdered in his own bed by his wife while he slept, and the show retired both characters permanently because nobody could replace what he brought to the role. That man was Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was born on the 24th of September, 1948 in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. He grew up to become one of the most versatile comedic performers of his generation. Before The Simpsons, Hartman spent 8 years on Saturday Night Live from 1986 to 1994, where he was considered the glue that held the cast together. His castmates called him the Glue because he could play anything, do any impression, and make any sketch work regardless of how weak the writing was. He did impressions of over 70 characters during his time on the show, including Bill Clinton, Frank Sinatra, and Ed McMahon. He was so reliable and so consistently funny that the other cast members depended on him to anchor sketches that might otherwise fall apart. In 1991, Hartman joined The Simpsons. His first appearance was in the second season, episode 10, titled Bart Gets Hit by a Car, where he voiced a character called Lionel Hutz, an incompetent Springfield lawyer. The role was originally supposed to be a one-time appearance, but Hartman enjoyed working on the show so much, and the writing staff enjoyed working with him so much, that additional parts were specifically written for him. Show creator Matt Groening later said that Hartman could get a laugh out of any line he was given and make a funny line even funnier. Groening said Hartman pulled the maximum amount of humor out of everything the writers threw at him. Over the course of 9 seasons, Hartman appeared in 52 episodes of The Simpsons and voiced 18 different characters. But 2 of those characters became iconic. The first was Lionel Hutz, Springfield's worst lawyer, a man who advertised on the back of a phone book, but had his office inside a shopping mall, and once offered Homer a business card that said "Works on contingency, no money down," which Lionel then corrected by moving the punctuation to read "Works on contingency, no money down." Hutz was everything wrong with the legal profession turned into a cartoon, and Hartman played him with a sleazy charm that made him one of the show's most beloved recurring characters. The second and even more famous character was Troy McClure. Troy was a washed-up Hollywood actor reduced to hosting infomercials, educational videos, and low-budget television specials. He was based on real-life B-movie actors Troy Donahue and Doug McClure, and the character served as a perfect parody of fading celebrity. Troy's signature was his introduction. He would appear on screen and say, "Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from such films as," and then list 2 absurd fictional titles like Dial M for Murderousness or The President's Neck is Missing. These titles became one of the show's longest running gags, and fans would wait for each new appearance just to hear what ridiculous films Troy would reference next. Troy's most prominent episode was A Fish Called Selma in Season 7, where Troy married Marge's sister Selma to revive his career and distance himself from rumors about his personal life involving fish at the Springfield Aquarium. The episode is considered one of the finest in the show's entire run. Entertainment Weekly ranked it 8th on their list of the top 25 Simpsons episodes ever. It featured Troy performing in a Planet of the Apes musical, singing a song called Dr. Zaius to the tune of Rock Me Amadeus. That musical number is regularly cited as one of the greatest moments in the history of the show. Hartman loved playing Troy McClure more than any other character in his career. He said on multiple occasions that Troy was his favorite role. On the set of his sitcom News Radio, Hartman would use his Troy McClure voice to entertain the studio audience between takes. He told interviewers that his favorite fans were Troy McClure fans, and he described the work on The Simpsons as almost an avocation, something he did for the pure love of it. Hartman was so passionate about Troy McClure that he actively pursued the idea of starring in a live-action film about the character. He wanted a movie that would follow Troy's misadventures in Hollywood, and he talked about publicizing Troy's fictional Betty Ford Clinic appearances as part of the promotion. Several members of The Simpsons writing staff expressed interest in helping write the script. Matt Groening later told Empire magazine that the idea never got further than enthusiasm, but admitted it would have been really fun if it had happened. Hartman even considered buying the film rights himself to make the movie happen. It was the role he cared about most, and he wanted to bring Troy to life beyond animation. But that film was never made. On the night of May 28, 1998, Phil Hartman was murdered. He was 49 years old. His third wife, Bryn Hartman, shot him 3 times while he slept in their bed at their home in Encino, California. Earlier that evening, the couple had gone to dinner at an Italian restaurant with friends. According to reports, they had argued, and Bryn, who had a history of substance abuse, had been drinking alcohol and using cocaine that night. She had also taken Zoloft, an antidepressant. Sometime before 3 in the morning, while Phil slept, Bryn entered their bedroom and shot him 3 times, killing him. She then drove to the home of Ron Douglas, a friend of hers, and confessed to what she had done. Douglas initially did not believe her. When he accompanied her back to the house and saw Phil's body, he called the police. Officers arrived at the Hartman residence. By that time, Bryn had locked herself in the bedroom with Phil's body. While police were on scene, she turned the gun on herself and took her own life. The Hartmans' 2 children, Sean and Bergen, were in the house that night. They were escorted out safely by Ron Douglas and police officers. The news of Phil Hartman's death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the entertainment industry. He was universally beloved by colleagues and fans. His death was mourned publicly by virtually everyone who had ever worked with him. On The Simpsons, the loss was felt immediately and permanently. The show's producers made a decision that would become one of the most respected gestures in television history. Rather than recast Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz with new voice actors, they retired both characters entirely. No one would ever voice Troy or Lionel again. The characters simply stopped appearing in the show with speaking roles. The producers felt that what Hartman brought to those roles was impossible to replace, and that recasting would be disrespectful to his memory and to what he had created. Hartman's final speaking appearance on The Simpsons was in the season 10 episode Bart the Mother, which aired on the 27th of September, 1998, 4 months after his death. In that episode, Troy McClure appeared briefly in a nature video. The episode was dedicated to Phil Hartman's memory. It was the last time audiences would ever hear Troy introduce himself with that famous line. The impact of Hartman's death extended beyond The Simpsons. Matt Groening was already developing a new animated series called Futurama at the time. He had specifically created the character of Zap Brannigan, a pompous, incompetent space captain for Phil Hartman to voice. When Hartman died, Billy West took over the role. But Groening honored Hartman by naming Futurama's protagonist Philip J. Fry after him. The name was a quiet tribute that most viewers never knew about. Chris Turner, in his book Planet Simpson, wrote that Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz represent the most significant contribution to the show outside its permanent cast, and that the show's golden age is hard to imagine without them. In 2006, IGN ranked Troy McClure first on their list of the top 25 Simpsons peripheral characters, calling him a wonderfully bizarre and entertaining character that showcases the best of what small roles on The Simpsons can be. That ranking came 8 years after Hartman's death, and Troy still held the top position. That is how beloved the character remained. Since the retirement, while both Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz have occasionally appeared in non-speaking background roles in later episodes. You might spot Troy standing in a crowd or Lionel walking past in the background, but they never speak. They are ghosts haunting their own show, present but silent, a permanent reminder of what was lost. The Simpsons has been running for over 35 years now. More than 800 episodes have aired across 37 seasons. The show has survived recasting, controversies, declining ratings, and changing cultural standards. But it has never replaced Phil Hartman. It has never attempted to bring Troy McClure or Lionel Hutz back with a new voice. In a show where almost everything eventually changes, that decision has remained absolute. Troy and Lionel belong to Phil Hartman and Phil Hartman alone. The show's refusal to recast them remains one of the most powerful acts of respect in television history. What makes the story even more painful is that Hartman's career was peaking when he died. He was starring in News Radio, one of the most critically acclaimed sitcoms of the 1990s. He had Futurama waiting for him. He had The Simpsons. He had the Troy McClure movie dream. He was 49 years old, at the height of his abilities, with years of work ahead of him. And all of it ended in a single night because of a domestic argument that spiraled into violence. The Simpsons continued after Phil Hartman's death. It went on to produce hundreds more episodes. But something was missing that the show could never get back. Two of its most distinctive voices fell silent, and they have stayed silent ever since. If you go back and watch early Simpsons episodes from seasons 2 through 9, you'll hear Phil Hartman everywhere. You'll hear Troy McClure hosting a telethon. You'll hear Lionel Hutz trying to sell orange juice he calls a refreshing drink. You'll hear Lyle Lanley convincing an entire town to build a monorail with a musical number. And you'll realize just how much one person contributed to a show that had hundreds of talented people working on it, and how much was taken away on one night in May of 1998. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have how a pay dispute over $4,000 got Maud Flanders permanently killed off the show. For the first 10 years of The Simpsons, Ned Flanders had a wife. Her name was Maud. She was kind, she was religious, she was patient with her eccentric husband, and she was an unassuming but consistent presence in the background of the show since the second season. Maud and Ned were the Simpson family's next-door neighbors, and together with their sons, Todd and Rod, they represented everything the Simpsons were not. They were polite, devout, well-behaved, and wholesome. Maud was a quiet character. She didn't get big storylines or memorable catchphrases. But she was always there, and her presence helped define what the Flanders family was. Maud was voiced by an actress named Maggie Roswell. Roswell had been part of the Simpsons voice cast since the very first season in 1989. In addition to Maud, she voiced several other recurring characters, including Helen Lovejoy, the Reverend's wife, who always shrieked, "Won't somebody please think of the children?" as well as Miss Hoover, Lisa's perpetually bored and depressed teacher, and Luan Van Houten, Milhouse's mother. Roswell was essentially the voice of Springfield's every woman. She played the normal wives, the average mothers, the background women who filled out the town. She wasn't a lead voice actor, but she was part of the show's backbone. In 1994, Roswell and her husband, Hal Rail, moved from Los Angeles to Denver, Colorado to raise their daughter. This created a logistical problem because The Simpsons recorded its voice work in Los Angeles. To continue her work on the show, Roswell had to fly from Denver to Los Angeles twice every week. She would fly in on Monday, record, fly home, then fly back on Thursday, record again, and fly home. Every single week during the production schedule, which ran roughly from March through November. That is a brutal commute by any standard, and the cost of those flights added up quickly. By 1999, after 5 years of making that round trip twice a week, Roswell asked Fox for a raise. At the time, she was earning approximately $2,000 per episode. She requested $6,000 per episode. That is not a typo. She wanted to go from $2,000 to $6,000. For context, the 6 main cast members of The Simpsons, the actors who voiced Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and the various characters played by Hank Azaria and Harry Shearer, were each earning $125,000 per episode at that time. Roswell was asking for $6,000. She was not trying to match their salaries, or she was simply trying to cover the cost of the plane tickets she needed to get to work. Fox's response was to offer her a raise of $150, not $150,000, $150 per episode, from $2,000 to $2,150. The raise would not have covered the cost of a single plane ticket. Roswell was stunned and felt the offer was insulting. She later told the Los Angeles Times that she was part of the backbone of The Simpsons and she didn't think the amount she requested was exorbitant. She said she wasn't asking for what the other cast members made. She was just trying to recoup all the costs she had in travel. She said if they had simply flown her in, she would still be working. But Fox refused, so Roswell quit. What happened next is one of the most controversial decisions in the show's history. Rather than working out a deal with Roswell or offering to pay for her flights or arranging a phone recording setup like other productions had done, the show's writers decided to kill Maud Flanders. The episode was called Alone Again Natra Diddley. It was the 14th episode of season 11 and it aired on the 13th of February 2000. In the episode, the Simpson family attends a stock car race at the Springfield Speedway. The Flanders family is there too, sitting in the stands. Between races, a squad of cheerleaders uses t-shirt cannons to fire free shirts into the crowd. Homer, shirtless and desperate for a free t-shirt, stands up and waves his arms, begging the cheerleaders to shoot one his way. They send an entire volley of t-shirts at him. At the last second, Homer bends down to pick up a bobby pin, and every single t-shirt flies over his head and slams into Maud, who is sitting directly behind him. The force of the shirts knocks Maud backwards over the railing of the bleachers. She falls to the parking lot below and dies. That is how Maud Flanders left The Simpsons. Death by t-shirt cannon because Homer bent over at the wrong moment. A character who had been on the show since season 2, who had appeared in dozens of episodes, who was the wife and mother of a major supporting family, was killed off in a slapstick accident at a racetrack. And the real reason she died had nothing to do with storytelling. She died because Fox refused to pay a voice actress an extra $4,000 per episode. Executive producer Mike Scully addressed the decision at the time. He told TV Guide that it was a chance for one of their regular characters, Ned Flanders, to face a challenge and grow in a new direction. He said the idea came up quickly and everyone latched onto it, and it just felt right. He added that they didn't want to kill a character for the sake of killing. They wanted it to have consequences for surviving characters to deal with in future episodes. But Scully also admitted there was another motivation. The episode was timed to air during the February sweeps period, when networks compete for the highest ratings to set advertising prices for the next cycle. Fox wanted a big event episode that would draw viewers, and a major character death was exactly the kind of spectacle that generates buzz. To maximize the surprise, Fox refused to send advanced screener tapes to television critics, which was unusual for the show. The network wanted the death to be a genuine shock for audiences tuning in live. The impact on the show was significant. With Maud gone, Ned Flanders went from being a cheerful, slightly annoying neighbor to a grieving widower. His character became darker, more frustrated, and more prone to angry outbursts. Over time, the traits that made Ned were exaggerated to an extreme degree. He became so intensely religious and so absurdly nice that the character felt like a parody of himself. This transformation became so well known that it actually coined a term. Flanderization is now a widely used word in television criticism that describes the process of a character being reduced to a single exaggerated trait over time. The term comes directly from what happened to Ned Flanders after Maud's death, and it is used to describe characters across all of television, not just The Simpsons. Marcia Mitzman Gavin was hired to replace Roswell and voice Maud's remaining lines in the death episode, as well as take over some of Roswell's other characters like Helen Lovejoy and Miss Hoover. But the replacements never had quite the same quality, and some of Roswell's characters were simply used less frequently. Here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 2002, 3 years after quitting, Maggie Roswell reached a new deal with Fox. The terms were straightforward. She would be allowed to record her lines from a studio in her home in Denver, rather than flying to Los Angeles. This was the accommodation she had essentially been asking for all along, a phone patch to the LA recording studio done from her basement. And that was all it would have taken to keep her on the show. But by the time Fox agreed to this arrangement, Maude was already dead and buried. Roswell returned to The Simpsons in season 14. She resumed voicing Helen Lovejoy, Miss Hoover, and Luan Van Houten. She even voiced Maude again in flashback episodes and ghost appearances, but Maude stayed dead. The show kept the continuity of Maude's death permanent, which meant Ned remained a widower for the rest of the series. Roswell told the Denver Post that Maude was such a vulnerable character. She said Maude, Lisa, and Marge were the only vulnerable characters on the show, and everybody else had an edge. With Maude gone, that arc was lost, and now there were just a lot of flashbacks. When you step back and look at the full picture, the math of this situation is staggering. See, Fox was earning hundreds of millions of dollars from The Simpsons through advertising revenue, syndication deals, and merchandise licensing. The show was the cornerstone of the Fox broadcast schedule. It had made the network famous, and Fox refused to pay a supporting voice actress $4,000 more per episode. That is what Maude Flanders' life was worth, $4,000, less than the cost of one night at a decent hotel in Los Angeles. The network would not budge, and a character who had been part of the show for a decade was written off in the most undignified way possible, hit by a t-shirt and knocked off a railing. Roswell herself took the entire situation with more grace than most people would have shown. She came back when the terms made sense. She never publicly attacked the show or its producers, for she has spoken warmly about the cast and crew in every interview she has given since returning. She simply wanted to be paid fairly for her work, and when the network refused, she walked away. The consequences of that refusal are still part of The Simpsons today, more than 25 years later. Ned Flanders is still a widower, Maude is still dead, and the decision to kill her remains one of the most nakedly corporate moves in the show's entire history. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the time Fox nearly killed The Simpsons, the 2011 cancellation threat, and the salary wars that almost ended everything. To understand how close The Simpsons came to being canceled, you need to understand the long and bitter history of salary disputes between the voice cast and Fox. This is a history that stretches across decades and involves some of the most aggressive hardball negotiation tactics in television. When The Simpsons first premiered on the 17th of December, 1989, the 6 main voice actors were each earning approximately $30,000 per episode. That includes Dan Castellaneta, who voices Homer, Grandpa Simpson, Krusty the Clown, Barney Gumble, Mayor Quimby, Groundskeeper Willie, Sideshow Mel, Hans Moleman, and over 30 other characters. It includes Julie Kavner, who voices Marge and her sisters Patty and Selma. Nancy Cartwright, who voices Bart, Nelson Muntz, Ralph Wiggum, and Todd Flanders. Yeardley Smith, who primarily voices only Lisa. Hank Azaria, who voices Moe, Chief Wiggum, comic book guy, Professor Frink, Apu, and many others. And Harry Shearer, who voices Mr. Burns, Smithers, Ned Flanders, Principal Skinner, Kent Brockman, Reverend Lovejoy, Lenny, Otto, and an enormous roster of additional characters. $30,000 per episode sounds like a lot of money until you realize what the show was generating. By the mid-1990s, The Simpsons was one of the most profitable franchises in television history. Merchandise alone was generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The first major salary battle happened in 1998. The cast banded together and demanded significant raises. Fox's initial response was to threaten to replace all 6 of them. The network actually began holding auditions for replacement voice actors. They brought in new people to read Homer and Bart and Marge, making it clear they were serious about the threat. This was an extraordinary gamble. The Simpsons voice cast had become inseparable from the characters in the public mind. Replacing them would have been like recasting the leads of a live-action sitcom mid-run. Show creator Matt Groening publicly sided with the cast during the 1998 dispute. The standoff ended with the actors receiving a raise to approximately $125,000 per episode. That was a huge jump from $30,000, but it was still a fraction of what the show was earning. The next major dispute came in 2004. By this point, the show's revenue had continued to explode through syndication deals and DVD sales. The cast demanded another raise. When Fox refused their terms, the actors stopped showing up to table reads. They simply did not come to work. Production stalled. Eventually, Fox blinked and raised their salaries to $360,000 per episode. In 2008, as the show's 20th season was being produced, the cast negotiated again. This time, they pushed for $500,000 per episode. Fox settled at $400,000, bringing each actor to approximately $8 million per year. These were enormous sums by any standard, but the cast argued they were still underpaid relative to the billions the show had generated for Fox through syndication, merchandise, and the 2007 Simpsons movie, which grossed $527 million worldwide. Then came October 2011 and the most serious threat the show had ever faced. 20th Century Fox Television released a public statement that read, 23 seasons in, and The Simpsons is as creatively vibrant as ever and beloved by millions around the world. We believe this brilliant series can and should continue, but we cannot produce future seasons under its current financial model. Behind the polite corporate language was a blunt ultimatum. Fox demanded that the 6 principal voice actors accept a 45% pay cut. If they refused, The Simpsons would be canceled at the end of season 23. No more new episodes, the show would simply end. A 45% cut from $400,000 per episode would have dropped each actor to approximately $220,000. Across a full season, that meant going from $8 million per year to roughly $4.5 million. Fox said the show's production costs had ballooned to approximately $5 million per episode, and the network claimed the deficit between what the show cost to make and what it earned from advertising had become unsustainable. The Daily Beast first reported the story, and it immediately made national headlines. The Simpsons, the longest-running primetime animated series in history, was being threatened with cancellation over money. Fans reacted with disbelief. Media analysts debated whether Fox was bluffing. Some pointed out that even if The Simpsons was canceled, Fox would continue earning enormous revenue from syndication, streaming, and merchandise for decades. Others argued that Fox had legitimate concerns about the show's rising costs and declining live viewership. The cast responded with a counteroffer. They were willing to accept a 30% pay cut, bringing their per-episode salary to approximately $300,000, but only if they received a share of the show's massive back-end profits from syndication, merchandise, and other revenue streams. The cast had been trying to get back-end participation for years, and every previous negotiation had failed to secure it. This time, they saw the threat of cancellation as leverage. Harry Shearer, who voices Mr. Burns, Ned Flanders, Principal Skinner, and numerous other characters, broke away from the group and made his own public statement. He said he was willing to take a 70% pay cut in exchange for a meaningful share of the show's profits. Shearer's willingness to go that far publicly highlighted the absurdity of the situation. One of the show's most important voice actors was volunteering to cut his own salary by more than 2/3, and Fox still would not give the cast a share of the billions the franchise had generated. Fox set a deadline of Friday at noon. The cast spent Friday morning on emergency conference calls with their representatives, trying to figure out their options. The deadline passed. Neither side said anything publicly. The silence was agonizing for fans who genuinely believed the show might end. Eventually, a deal was reached. The cast agreed to accept a pay cut of approximately 30%, bringing their salaries to just over $300,000 per episode. Everyone involved in the show took pay reductions, including the executive producers and other creative staff. It was not clear whether the cast ultimately received any back-end profit participation. What was clear was that Fox got its cost reductions and the show continued. The deal was structured to extend the show beyond season 23, which it did. The Simpsons went on to produce dozens more seasons. As of April 2025, the show has been renewed through season 40, ensuring it will remain on the air for the foreseeable future. It has never been canceled. No cancellation has ever been officially announced at any point in its history. But the 2011 crisis revealed something uncomfortable about the economics of television's most famous animated series. The Simpsons had generated billions of dollars in revenue for Fox and its parent companies over the course of 2 decades, and billions from syndication deals that sold the show to every television market on Earth. Billions from merchandise that put Bart Simpson on t-shirts, lunchboxes, and video games. Hundreds of millions from a theatrically released movie. And despite all of that, the network threatened to end the show because it did not want to pay 6 voice actors $400,000 each per episode. The math suggests this was never really about whether Fox could afford The Simpsons. It was about how much of the pie the people who actually made the show were entitled to receive. That question has never been fully answered, and the cast has never received the back-end profits they spent decades fighting for. What is also worth noting is how the salary history of The Simpsons mirrors a broader pattern in the entertainment industry. The people whose voices and performances create the product are consistently paid a fraction of what that product earns. In 1989, 6 actors were paid $30,000 per episode to voice a show that would go on to generate an estimated $13 billion in total franchise revenue. The salary battles were not about greed. They were about workers trying to receive a fair share of the value they created. And every single time, the fight was brutal, the threats were serious, and the actors had to risk their jobs to get even a partial correction. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the Apu controversy and how one of the show's most recognizable characters was quietly erased. For nearly 3 decades, Apu Nahasapima was one of the most prominent characters on The Simpsons. He was the Indian-American owner of the Quick E-Mart, Springfield's overpriced and understocked convenience store. He had been a fixture of the show since its earliest seasons, and over the years, he received substantial character development. The show explored his arranged marriage to Manjula, the birth of their octuplets, his immigration story, his struggles with American citizenship, and his relationship with the Simpson family. Apu was given more screen time and more storylines than most supporting characters on the show. But there was always a problem sitting underneath all of that character development. And it was a problem the show ignored for a very long time. Apu was voiced by Hank Azaria, a white actor. The character was built around an exaggerated Indian accent that leaned heavily on stereotypes. Apu ran a convenience store, spoke in a thick accent, had a catchphrase of "thank you, come again," and embodied many of the tropes that South Asian Americans had been objecting to for years. For a long time, these objections existed mostly at the margins of popular culture. The Simpsons was so widely loved and so critically acclaimed that criticizing one of its characters felt like criticizing comedy itself. People who raised concerns about Apu were often told they were being too sensitive or that the show made fun of everyone equally. That changed in 2017 when comedian Hari Kondabolu released a documentary called The Problem with Apu. The film examined how the character had shaped the way South Asian Americans were perceived and treated in the United States. Kondabolu interviewed actors, comedians, writers, and public figures of South Asian descent, many of whom describe being called Apu in school, being mocked with the accent, or being reduced to the stereotype the character represented. The documentary argued that Apu was not just a harmless joke, but a cultural force that gave millions of Americans permission to reduce an entire ethnic group to a single cartoonish image. The documentary generated significant media attention and forced a public conversation about representation in animation that had been brewing for years. The question was no longer whether Apu was funny, but whether the show had a responsibility to address the harm the character had caused. The Simpsons' initial response was not well received. In April 2018, the show aired an episode called No Good Read Goes Unpunished, which was the 15th episode of season 29. In the episode, Marge reads Lisa a bedtime story and struggles to update its outdated content without ruining the story. At the end of the scene, Lisa turns to the camera and looks directly at a framed photograph of Apu sitting on her nightstand. She says that something that started decades ago and was applauded and inoffensive is now politically incorrect. She asks, "What can you do?" Marge replies that some things will be dealt with at a later date. Lisa looks at the camera again and says, "If at all." The response was widely criticized as dismissive and tone-deaf. Rather than engaging with the legitimate concerns raised by Kondabolu's documentary, the show appeared to be shrugging off the issue and mocking the very idea that it should be addressed. Social media erupted with people accusing the writers of being out of touch. Kondabolu himself responded on Twitter, calling the scene disappointing. Behind the scenes, however, the conversation was more nuanced than the episode suggested. Hank Azaria, who had voiced Apu since joining the cast in Season 2, began a period of personal reflection about his role in perpetuating the stereotype. In January 2020, Azaria announced publicly that he would no longer voice Apu. He later spoke in interviews about going through a process of education and self-examination, talking to South Asian colleagues and friends about the impact the character had on their lives. Azaria expressed genuine remorse and said he wished he had come to this realization sooner. The decision to step away from Apu was part of a broader shift at The Simpsons. In 2020, the show announced a new policy that white actors would no longer voice non-white characters. This led to several recasting decisions beyond Apu. Dr. Julius Hibbert, Springfield's family doctor, was moved from Harry Shearer to Kevin Michael Richardson, starting in season 32 in 2021. Carl Carlson and Officer Lou were moved from Hank Azaria to Alex Desert, also starting in season 32. These were not minor characters. Hibbert, Carl, and Lou had been fixtures of the show for decades, and their recasting represented a significant acknowledgement that the old approach was no longer acceptable. As for Apu himself, the character has been largely phased out of the show. He still technically exists in the Simpsons universe, but he has not had a significant speaking role since Azaria stepped away. Future plans for the character, including whether he will be recast with a South Asian voice actor or simply remain in the background indefinitely, have not been publicly confirmed. The Apu controversy matters because it illustrates how a show that ran for so long was eventually forced to reckon with decisions made decades earlier when cultural standards were different. The Simpsons built Apu during an era when casting a white actor to do an exaggerated ethnic accent was standard practice in animation. By the time the culture shifted and those practices were recognized as harmful, Apu had appeared in hundreds of episodes and had become one of the most recognized Indian characters in American media. Undoing that legacy was not simple, and the show's initial attempt to brush it off only made things worse. The eventual reckonings with Azaria's departure and the broader recasting policy came years after the conversation started. But they did come, and they permanently changed how The Simpsons approaches the question of who gets to voice whom. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the episode that disappeared, Stark Raving Dad, and the removal of Michael Jackson from The Simpsons. On the 19th of September, 1991, The Simpsons aired the first episode of its third season. It was called Stark Raving Dad, and it featured what was arguably the biggest celebrity guest appearance in the show's history up to that point. In the episode, Homer is committed to a mental institution after accidentally wearing a pink shirt to work at the nuclear power plant. While inside the institution, he meets a large, bald white man who claims to be Michael Jackson. The man introduces himself as Michael Jackson and speaks and sings exactly like the real Michael Jackson. This is because the character was, in fact, voiced by the real Michael Jackson. Jackson was a fan of the show and had personally approached the producers about appearing in an episode. He agreed to voice the character, but insisted on being credited under the pseudonym John J. Smith. This was reportedly because Jackson's contract with his record label would not allow him to provide vocals for outside projects. As a result, while Jackson provided the speaking voice for the character, the singing portions were actually performed by a sound-alike named Kip Lennon. When the character sings "Happy Birthday" to Lisa in the episode, that is Lennon's voice, not Jackson's. The episode was a major cultural event when it aired. Michael Jackson was the biggest pop star on the planet in 1991, and his involvement with The Simpsons generated enormous attention. The episode drew strong ratings and became one of the most talked about moments of the show's early years. For decades afterwards, Stark Raving Dad was considered a classic episode and a highlight of Season 3. Then, in March 2019, HBO aired a documentary called Leaving Neverland. The documentary featured two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who alleged in graphic detail that Michael Jackson had sexually abused them as children over extended periods of time, as the allegations were not new. Jackson had faced accusations of child sexual abuse throughout his life, including a highly publicized criminal trial in 2005 in which he was acquitted on all counts. But the Leaving Neverland documentary presented the allegations in a way that brought renewed scrutiny to Jackson's legacy and reignited a fierce public debate about whether his work should continue to be celebrated. In the wake of Leaving Neverland, the executive producers of The Simpsons made a decision. James L. Brooks, Al Jean, and Matt Groening agreed that Stark Raving Dad would be pulled from circulation. The episode was removed from syndication, excluded from the Disney Plus streaming platform when it launched in November 2019, and would not be included in future DVD pressings. As Al Jean told the Wall Street Journal that it felt like the only choice to make. He explained that the creative team could no longer feel comfortable having the episode represent the show. This was an extraordinary move. In over 30 years of The Simpsons, across more than 800 episodes, only a tiny handful have ever been restricted or pulled from distribution. Stark Raving Dad was effectively erased from the show's official history. You cannot watch it through any legitimate channel. It does not appear on Disney Plus. It is not available on Hulu, FX, or any other platform that carries The Simpsons. If you want to see the episode, you have to find an unofficial source. The show's creators made it disappear. The decision was controversial. Some fans and commentators argued that removing the episode was the right thing to do given the seriousness of the allegations. Others pushed back, arguing that the episode itself contained no inappropriate content and that suppressing a piece of television history set a troubling precedent. Critics of the removal pointed out that Jackson was never convicted of any crime, and that erasing his contributions to a beloved show amounted to a retroactive punishment without due process. Supporters of the removal argued that the producers had every right to decide what represented their show, and that keeping the episode in circulation would implicitly endorse Jackson's involvement. Regardless of where anyone falls on that debate, the removal of Stark Raving Dad represents one of the most unusual chapters in The Simpsons history. It's a show that has survived every conceivable controversy, from Bart Simpson being branded a bad influence in the early 1990s to the Apu debate decades later, chose to actively suppress one of its own episodes. The show decided that some things are too disturbing to keep in the library, even when the disturbing element has nothing to do with the episode's actual content. Stark Raving Dad itself is a light-hearted, warm episode about Homer making a friend and Bart writing a birthday song for Lisa. There is nothing dark or inappropriate in the episode's story. The darkness is entirely in who voiced one of the characters and what that person allegedly did outside the recording studio. The episode remains unavailable through official channels. It is one of the only Simpsons episodes to simply not exist in the public catalog, shatter a gap in the show's filmography that visitors to Disney Plus will never know about, unless someone tells them it was once there. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the Treehouse of Horror episodes and just how dark The Simpsons is actually willing to go. Every year since 1990, The Simpsons has produced a Halloween special. These episodes are called Treehouse of Horror, and they exist outside the show's normal continuity. Characters can die, the laws of physics can be ignored, and the writers are free to explore genres and subject matter that would be completely out of bounds in a regular episode. There are no consequences. Nothing that happens in a Treehouse of Horror episode carries over to the next regular episode. This freedom has allowed the show to produce some of the darkest, most violent, and most disturbing content in the history of network animated television. The first Treehouse of Horror aired on the 25th of October, 1990, as part of Season 2. It established the format that would continue for over 3 decades. Each episode contains 3 short segments, usually parodying a well-known horror movie, science fiction story, or literary classic. The early Treehouse episodes were relatively tame by modern standards. They featured haunted houses, alien encounters, and vampire stories. They were scary in the way a fun Halloween haunted house is scary, designed more for thrills than genuine horror. But as the show continued and the Treehouse tradition became established, the segments grew progressively darker and more violent. By the time the show reached its later seasons, Treehouse of Horror episodes were exploring territory that pushed the boundaries of what a network television show rated for general audiences could depict. The Treehouse of Horror episodes carry a TV-14 rating, making them the only regular episodes of The Simpsons to receive that designation. The rest of the series is rated TV-PG. That rating distinction exists for a reason. These episodes contain content that is significantly more intense than anything in the show's normal run. Consider some of what the Treehouse episodes have depicted over the years. Characters are routinely murdered in graphic and creative ways. Homer has been dismembered, decapitated, impaled, and dissolved in acid across various segments. Bart has been eaten by his own family, turned inside out, and killed in dozens of different scenarios. The show has depicted cannibalism, demonic possession, body horror, mass extinction events, serial killers, and apocalyptic scenarios. In one particularly notorious segment, Homer accidentally creates a time-traveling toaster and keeps returning to alternate timelines where the world has been destroyed in different ways, unable to find one that is normal. One of the darkest Treehouse segments comes from Season 30's Treehouse of Horror special. In the episode's opening, baby Maggie is revealed to have demonic powers. She bears the number 666 under her hair, the number of the devil. The segment shows Maggie using her supernatural abilities to cause Kearney and Jimbo, 2 of Springfield's bullies, to hang themselves. She also chokes Dr. Hibbert with his own stethoscope, spins the heads of stuffed animals around, and makes them vomit up their stuffing. The opening ends with Maggie rising into the air, breaking open the roof of a church, while Homer, Marge, and Ned Flanders stand below. Homer's response to learning his baby daughter is literally, the Antichrist is to say she is still better than another boy, at which point all 3 adults are impaled by giant spear-like weapons through their hearts. Another deeply unsettling Treehouse segment parodies the Paranormal Activity franchise. In this segment, hidden cameras are placed throughout the Simpson home. The footage reveals Marge waking up in the middle of the night and spending 4 straight hours watching Homer sleep, standing motionless beside the bed. Later, Homer goes to the bathroom and Marge appears and watches him urinate for over 20 minutes, in neither of them speaking. The segment eventually reveals a deal Marge made with the devil when she was 8 years old, after catching her teenage sisters Patty and Selma in the attic performing a satanic ritual because there was nothing good on television and they had no boyfriends. The devil agreed to come back in 30 years to take Marge's favorite child. The segment concludes with Homer negotiating a different deal with Satan, which turns out to be a sexual arrangement involving Homer, Satan, and another devil. Homer asks for a safety word, which is cinnamon, and then throws his robe at the camera while the devil screams the safety word repeatedly. In another Treehouse segment that parodies crime dramas, Lisa becomes a serial killer with a split personality. The segment shows her murdering multiple Springfield residents, including Nelson Muntz, as part of a plan to eventually kill Sideshow Bob. The victims are all firstborn children, and the segment ends with Lisa's evil personality playing music from a Gilbert and Sullivan opera while stabbing Sideshow Bob to death with a knife in their shared prison cell. Other Treehouse segments have featured Homer's DNA spreading as a virus that transforms the entire population of Springfield into Homer clones. The infected people gain Homer's weight, voice, baldness, and personality, and the virus spreads through radioactive burps. The segment ends with every person on Earth turned into Homer Simpson, all of them singing together while the original Homer celebrates living in a world of himself. What makes these segments disturbing is not just their content, but the contrast between the show's normal tone and what happens in the Treehouse specials. During a regular episode, The Simpsons is a family comedy about a working-class American family dealing with relatable problems. Homer goes to work, Bart gets in trouble at school, Lisa struggles with being different, and Marge holds everything together. Then once a year, the show lets all of that go and descends into genuine horror, ultra-violence, and dark comedy that would be shocking even in an adult-oriented animated series like South Park or Rick and Morty. The Treehouse of Horror tradition has now spanned over 35 years and more than 35 specials, producing well over 100 individual horror segments. Taken together, they represent an astonishing body of work in the horror comedy genre. Some segments are silly and forgettable, others are genuinely unsettling. And a few have become iconic pieces of television that fans discuss and debate decades after they aired. The annual Treehouse special remains one of the most anticipated events in The Simpsons calendar, and the show continues to push boundaries with each new installment, finding new ways to horrify, disturb, and entertain an audience that thinks it has already seen everything. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Homer's Enemy, the episode that deconstructed the entire show and asked a question nobody wanted to answer. On the 4th of May, 1997, The Simpsons aired the 23rd episode of its 8th season. The episode was called Homer's Enemy, and it was written by John Swartzwelder, who holds the record as the most prolific individual writer in the show's history, with 59 episodes to his credit. The episode was directed by Jim Reardon. What Swartzwelder and Reardon created was one of the darkest, most philosophically challenging episodes the show has ever produced, and it did something no previous episode had attempted. It introduced a character from the real world into the cartoon world of Springfield, and showed what would happen when someone who operated by real-world logic had to confront the absurdity of Homer Simpson's existence. The character was Frank Grimes, who asks everyone to call him Grimy. The episode opens with a news segment hosted by Kent Brockman profiling Grimes and his tragic life story. Frank Grimes was abandoned by his parents at the age of 4. He was never adopted. He grew up on the streets, putting himself through school by working multiple jobs simultaneously. He earned a degree in nuclear physics through years of night school. He earned another degree in something else. He worked his way from nothing to something through sheer determination and hard work, receiving absolutely no help from anyone. The profile describes him as a man who had to fight for every single thing he ever achieved. Mr. Burns watches the profile on television and is briefly moved by Grimes' story. He tells Smithers to hire this man immediately. But by the time Grimes arrives at the Springfield nuclear power plant, Burns has already forgotten about him because he became more interested in a heroic dog he saw in a different news segment. Grimes is assigned to work alongside Homer Simpson. This is where the episode becomes something remarkable. Frank Grimes observes Homer's life and is progressively destroyed by what he sees. Homer is incompetent at his job. He is lazy, stupid, and dangerous. He regularly endangers the lives of his co-workers through negligence and ignorance. He should not have this job. He should not have any job, let alone a position at a nuclear power plant where his incompetence could cause a meltdown that kills hundreds of thousands of people. And yet, Homer lives a life that Frank Grimes, who did everything right, could never achieve. Homer owns a large house in a nice neighborhood. Homer has a loving wife and 3 children. Homer has been to space on a NASA mission. Homer has won a Grammy Award. Homer has met presidents and celebrities. Homer has a 2-car garage and a pet dog and a 2-story home at 742 Evergreen Terrace. Homer accomplishes extraordinary things without trying, while Frank Grimes accomplishes ordinary things only through extraordinary effort. As Grimes realizes this, he becomes increasingly unhinged. He confronts Homer repeatedly, pointing out the absurdity of his situation. He tells Homer that if he lived in any other country in the world, he would have starved to death long ago. He cannot understand how someone so fundamentally incompetent can be so deeply rewarded by the universe. The anger builds throughout the episode as Grimes watches Homer receive praise, affection, and success that he has done nothing to earn. Where the climax arrives when Homer enters a children's science contest at the power plant and wins first place with a design that is obviously terrible. Grimes finally snaps. He runs through the power plant, screaming that he is Homer Simpson, mocking Homer by imitating his behavior. He grabs food and shoves it into his mouth without looking. He puts his feet up on his console. He acts recklessly and carelessly, just like Homer does every single day. Then Grimes grabs a pair of high-voltage power cables without safety gloves, something Homer would do without consequence, and says, "Look at me. I am Homer Simpson." The electricity kills him instantly. He collapses and dies on the floor of the nuclear power plant. The final scene of the episode takes place at Frank Grimes' funeral. The Reverend says a few words about the deceased, Homer, and sitting in the pews, falls asleep. In his sleep, Homer mumbles something about changing the channel. The congregation, rather than being horrified, laughs at Homer's antics. The episode ends with Homer snoring at the funeral of the man his existence drove to madness and death, and everyone around him finding it amusing. There is no lesson learned. There is no moment of reflection. Homer does not change. Springfield does not change. Frank Grimes is dead and nobody cares, except to laugh at the man who inadvertently caused his death. Homer's enemy is widely considered one of the most disturbing episodes in the show's entire run, and not because of violence or horror, but because of what it says about the show itself. The episode is a meta-commentary on sitcom logic. It asks, what would happen if a real person had to live in a world where a cartoon character is rewarded for being terrible? The answer is that the real person would go insane and die, and the cartoon character would continue on exactly as before, oblivious and unchanged. Frank Grimes represents every viewer who has ever wondered how Homer Simpson keeps his job, keeps his family, and keeps surviving disasters that should have killed him 100 times over. The show's answer is that questioning the logic of the cartoon is a losing game. The cartoon will always win because the cartoon does not operate by the rules of the real world, and anyone who tries to hold it accountable will be destroyed. Frank Grimes is one of the very few characters to die permanently in the main canon of The Simpsons. His death was not reversed, not retconned, and not treated as a joke in subsequent episodes. He stayed dead. The show later brought back his son, Frank Grimes Jr., in season 14, who attempted to get revenge on Homer for his father's death. But Grimes Sr. remained dead. In a show where characters survive falls from cliffs, nuclear meltdowns, and being shot into space, Frank Grimes died from doing exactly what Homer does every day. The only difference is that Homer is protected by cartoon logic, and Frank Grimes was not. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the composer who was fired after 27 years, and the music The Simpsons quietly lost. For over a quarter of a century, the music of The Simpsons was shaped by one man. His name was Alf Clausen, and he served as the show's primary composer from season 2 in 1990 all the way through season 28 in 2017. During that time, Clausen composed original music for over 560 episodes. He wrote the scores that underscored Homer's emotional moments, the tension cues for Sideshow Bob episodes, the grand orchestral arrangements for Treehouse of Horror specials, and dozens of original songs that became inseparable from the show's identity. If you have ever watched The Simpsons and been moved by a musical moment, there is an overwhelming chance that Alf Clausen wrote that music. He composed the score for the monorail song in Marge vs. the Monorail, one of the most beloved musical numbers in television history. He arranged the music for See My Vest, this Mr. Burns' gleefully evil song about his collection of garments made from animal fur. He wrote the musical arrangements for We Put the Spring in Springfield, a burlesque-style number that the writers created as an homage to classic showstopper tunes. He scored the emotional climax of And Maggie Makes Three, the episode where Homer reveals that photos of Maggie are covering a plaque at the nuclear plant that reads, "Don't forget, you're here forever," transforming it into Do It For Her. That scene's emotional power comes from the combination of the visual gag and Clausen's understated, tender scoring beneath it. Clausen worked with a full orchestra for the show's recordings. He maintained a level of musical quality and ambition that was unusual for a television series, let alone an animated one. His compositions range from jazz to classical to rock to Broadway-style show tunes, depending on what each episode required. He was nominated for multiple Emmy Awards and won 2 Primetime Emmys for his work on The Simpsons. He was widely respected in the industry as one of the finest television composers of his generation. In 2017, at the age of 76, Alf Clausen was fired after 27 years of continuous service. After composing music for more than 500 episodes, after becoming one of the most important creative contributors in the show's history, he was let go. The decision was widely reported as a cost-cutting measure. The show transitioned from Clausen's full orchestral approach to a smaller, cheaper music production setup. The new music was produced by Bleeding Fingers Music, a company associated with composer Hans Zimmer that specializes in providing scores for television and film at lower costs than traditional orchestral recording. The change was noticeable immediately. Fans who had grown up listening to Clausen's rich, layered scores suddenly heard music that felt thinner, more synthesized, and less emotionally resonant. The grand orchestral sound that had defined The Simpsons for nearly 3 decades was replaced by arrangements that relied more heavily on electronic instruments and smaller ensembles. The music still served the show's needs, but something intangible was lost. The warmth, the personality, the sense that each episode's score had been handcrafted for that specific story was diminished. Clausen did not go quietly. He filed a lawsuit against Fox, alleging age discrimination and disability discrimination. His legal claim suggested that the decision to fire him was motivated at least in part by his age, and that the cost-cutting rationale was a cover for something more troubling. The lawsuit drew attention to the broader issue of how the entertainment industry treats older creative professionals, particularly those whose institutional knowledge and artistic contributions are difficult to quantify in a spreadsheet. The lawsuit was eventually settled or dismissed, The exact terms of the resolution were not publicly disclosed, and neither side commented extensively on the outcome. Clausen's departure from the show remained permanent. He has not returned to compose for The Simpsons. The firing of Alf Clausen raises uncomfortable questions about the values of a franchise that generates billions of dollars. Here was a man who had dedicated nearly 3 decades of his career to a single show. His work was integral to the emotional texture of hundreds of episodes that fans cherish. He elevated the show's production quality in ways that most viewers felt but could not articulate. And when the network decided to save money, he was one of the first things cut. The Simpsons is estimated to cost approximately $5 million per episode to produce. The show generates revenue through advertising, syndication, streaming, and merchandise that dwarfs that cost many times over. The decision to replace a beloved, award-winning composer with a cheaper alternative was not made because the show could not afford Alf Clausen. It was made because someone in the corporate chain decided the show could afford to have less artistry, less orchestral depth, less of the human touch that distinguished The Simpsons music from every other animated show on television. And that decision, once made, could not be undone. The music of The Simpsons from season 29 onward is different, and the difference is a permanent loss. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have The Simpsons predictions, the phenomenon that became a conspiracy theory, and what is actually going on. If you have spent any time on the internet in the last decade, you have almost certainly encountered the claim that The Simpsons predicts the future. The idea has become one of the most persistent and widely shared pop culture narratives of the modern era. Social media accounts with millions of followers post screenshots from old Simpsons episodes alongside photos of real events, arguing that the show somehow foresaw what was going to happen years or even decades before it occurred. The claims range from the plausible to the absurd, and they have turned a satirical cartoon into something approaching a modern oracle. The most famous alleged prediction involves Donald Trump. In an episode called Bart to the Future, which aired on the 19th of March, 2000 as part of season 11, the show depicted a future in which Lisa Simpson becomes the first female president of the United States. In the episode, Lisa mentions that she is inheriting quite a budget crunch from President Trump. That line was broadcast 16 years before Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election. When Trump actually became president, the clip went viral. Millions of people shared it as proof that The Simpsons had predicted the future. Another frequently cited prediction involves Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox. In the 1998 episode When You Dish Upon a Star, a sign is visible showing 20th Century Fox as a division of Walt Disney Company. This was a joke at the time, a visual gag about corporate consolidation in the entertainment industry. 21 years later, in 2019, Disney actually did acquire 21st Century Fox, making the joke a reality. When this happened, the internet exploded with claims that The Simpsons had called it again. Other supposed predictions include smartwatch technology, video phone calls, autocorrect failures, the censorship tools for television, and various political and technological developments that the show seemed to foreshadow. Each time a new supposed prediction surfaces, it generates a wave of social media attention and reinforces the narrative that The Simpsons has some supernatural ability to see the future. The reality is far less mystical. The Simpsons has produced over 800 episodes across 37 seasons, spanning more than 35 years of continuous production. Each episode contains hundreds of jokes, visual gags, background details, and throwaway lines. When you multiply 800 episodes by the dozens of cultural references and satirical observations in each one, you get tens of thousands of individual moments that could potentially align with future events. With that volume of content, the statistical coincidences are not just likely, they are inevitable. The show has always been written by people who pay very close attention to politics, technology, culture, and trends. The Simpsons writers have included graduates from some of the best universities in the country, including several with advanced degrees in mathematics and science. They read voraciously, follow current events obsessively, and their job is to satirize every aspect of contemporary life. When a joke about corporate consolidation in 1998 comes true in 2019, it is not because the writers had a crystal ball. It is because smart people who understood how corporations behave made an educated guess that happened to be correct. The Donald Trump prediction is perhaps the most instructive example. Trump had been a prominent public figure in American life since the 1980s. He had flirted with the idea of running for president multiple times before 2000. He had appeared on countless talk shows discussing politics. The idea that Donald Trump might someday run for president and possibly win was not a wild fantasy in 2000. It was a reasonable extrapolation from a man who was already famous, already politically active, and already had the name recognition that a presidential campaign requires. The Simpsons writers made a joke that seemed outlandish at the time, but was actually based on observable patterns in Trump's behavior. What the predictions phenomenon really tells us is something about human psychology rather than something about The Simpsons. Humans are wired to find patterns, even where no patterns exist. And this is a well-documented cognitive bias called apophenia. We notice the hits and ignore the misses. For every Simpsons joke that seems to predict the future, there are thousands that predicted nothing at all. Nobody makes viral posts about the things The Simpsons got wrong. Nobody shares screenshots of the episodes where Springfield was attacked by a 50-foot giant insect, or where Homer was elected sanitation commissioner and drove the entire town into a garbage crisis. Those things did not happen in real life, so they are ignored. Only the coincidences get amplified. The Simpsons writers have addressed the prediction narrative multiple times, generally with a mixture of bemusement and good humor. They do not claim any special ability to foresee the future. They attribute the supposed predictions to the law of large numbers. When you produce enough content about enough topics over enough years, some of it will inevitably line up with future events. That is not prediction. That is statistics. But the myth persists because it is more interesting than the truth. The idea that a cartoon show can predict the future is exciting and mysterious. The idea that statistical coincidences are inevitable when you produce 800 episodes of topical satire is boring and mundane. People prefer the exciting version, and social media rewards the exciting version with clicks, shares, and engagement. So the myth lives on, growing stronger every time a new supposed prediction surfaces, and The Simpsons continues to be treated like a modern-day Nostradamus by an internet that loves a good conspiracy more than a good explanation. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the voice actors who died during the show's run, and the characters they left behind forever. The Simpsons has been on the air long enough that multiple people who helped create it have passed away while the show continued without them. In most television shows, the death of a cast member is a rare and shocking event. In The Simpsons, it has happened repeatedly, and each time it has forced the show to make difficult decisions about what to do with characters who can no longer speak because the person who gave them a voice is gone. We have already discussed Phil Hartman in detail, but his case established the precedent for how The Simpsons handles the death of a voice actor. When Hartman was murdered in 1998, the show retired his characters permanently. Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz were never recast. The decision was made out of respect and out of recognition that Hartman's performances were irreplaceable. That precedent would be tested again and again in the decades that followed. Marcia Wallace was a veteran actress best known for her role as Carol Kester on The Bob Newhart Show in the 1970s. On The Simpsons, she voiced Edina Krabappel, the fourth-grade teacher at Springfield Elementary who had a perpetually exhausted attitude toward her students, her job, and life in general. Edna was one of the show's most consistent supporting characters, appearing regularly from the first season onward. Over the years, the character had several significant storylines, including a long-running romantic relationship with Ned Flanders that began after Maud's death. Marcia Wallace died on the 25th of October, 2013, at the age of 70. In response, The Simpsons retired Edna Krabappel permanently. The character was not recast. Instead, the show acknowledged Edna's passing with one of the most moving tributes in its history. In the episode 4 Regrettings and a Funeral, which aired in season 25, the chalkboard gag in the opening sequence read simply, "We'll really miss you, Mrs. K." Edna's death was later confirmed within the show's canon in the episode The Man Who Grew Too Much. The character was gone, and she stayed gone. Unlike some shows that might quietly replace an actor and keep the character alive, The Simpsons treated Edna's departure with the same finality it had given Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz. And Russi Taylor was another longtime contributor to The Simpsons whose death left a gap in the show's cast. Taylor voiced Martin Prince, the bookish and frequently bullied classmate of Bart Simpson, as well as the twins Sherry and Terry and the foreign exchange student Uter Zorker. Taylor was also famous outside The Simpsons as the voice of Minnie Mouse for Disney, a role she held for over 3 decades. She died on the 26th of July, 2019. Following her death, her Simpsons characters were taken over by Gray Delisle, also known as Gray Griffin, a prolific voice actress who has voiced characters in dozens of animated series. Delisle assumed the roles of Martin Prince, Sherry, and Terry, and has continued voicing them since. The decision to recast Russi Taylor's characters rather than retire them was different from how the show handled Phil Hartman and Marcia Wallace's departures. In those cases, the characters were so closely associated with specific performers that retirement felt like the only respectful option. Martin Prince, Sherry, and Terry, while beloved, were not defined by their voice performances in the same way Troy McClure was defined by Hartman's comedic timing. The show judged that these characters could continue with a new voice actress, and Delisle was chosen because of her versatility and her ability to approximate Taylor's performances. More recently, The Simpsons experienced another significant cast change, though not due to death. Pamela Hayden, who voiced Milhouse Van Houten, Rod Flanders, Jimbo Jones, and Janie Powell, retired from the show in November 2024 after 35 years of service. Her final appearance was reportedly on the 24th of November 2024 in a Treehouse of Horror episode. Hayden had been with the show since its very first season, making her one of the longest-serving members of the voice cast. Her retirement prompted multiple recasting decisions. Kelly MacLeod took over the role of Milhouse Van Houten starting in season 37. Mo Collins was announced as the new voice of Jimbo Jones. Chris Edgerly assumed the role of Rod Flanders starting in late season 36. The broader pattern here is striking. The Simpsons has now existed long enough that its voice cast is aging, retiring, and dying. The show began in 1989 when most of its cast members were relatively young. Dan Castellaneta was in his early 30s. Nancy Cartwright was 31. Julie Kavner was 39. Now those actors are in their 60s and 70s. Harry Shearer, who voices Mr. Burns, Ned Flanders, Principal Skinner, and dozens of other characters, was born in 1943, making him over 80 years old. The show has outlived some of its performers and is beginning to outlast others. Each death and each retirement leaves a permanent scar on the show's fabric. When Marcia Wallace died and Edna Krabappel was retired, the show lost one of its most important recurring characters and had to restructure storylines that had depended on Edna's presence. When Phil Hartman was murdered and Troy McClure was retired, the show lost a type of comedy that no other performer could provide. When Alf Clausen was fired, the show lost a musical voice that had defined its emotional texture for nearly 3 decades. The characters who have been permanently killed in the main canon of the show form a long and sobering list. Bleeding Gums Murphy died of illness in Season 6. Frank Grimes was electrocuted in Season 8. Maud Flanders was knocked off the bleachers in Season 11. Amber Simpson died of a drug overdose in Season 18. Homer's mother, Mona Simpson, died of old age in Season 19, her second and definitive death. Fat Tony, the original version, died of a heart attack in Season 22 and was immediately replaced by his cousin Fit Tony, who gained weight and became the new Fat Tony. Edna Krabappel was retired following Wallace's death, and her passing was confirmed in Season 25. Rabbi Hyman Krostofsky, Krusty the Clown's father, died in Season 26. Larry Dalrymple, a barfly who had been a background character since Season 1, died in Season 35 in one of the rare instances of a background character receiving an actual death storyline. And most recently, Duffman was retired in Season 37. Each of these deaths represents a permanent change to the show's universe. Unlike most sitcoms, which maintain a static cast and reset everything to the status quo at the end of each episode, The Simpsons has allowed death to be real and lasting. Characters who die do not come back. Their absence is felt in subsequent episodes. The town of Springfield has slowly lost members of its community over 35 years, and those losses accumulate. The Springfield of Season 37 is not the same place as the Springfield of Season 1. It is quieter, it has fewer voices, and the people who are still there carry the weight of the ones who are gone. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Sam Simon, the forgotten co-creator who built the show's soul and then walked away. When people think about who created The Simpsons, two names come to mind. Matt Groening is usually the first. He designed the characters, gave them their names, and created the visual concept of the Simpson family. James L. Brooks is the second, the legendary television producer who developed the show and served as executive producer for decades. Brooks holds the record for the most primetime Emmy Awards won by a single person, 22 across all of his shows, 12 of which came from The Simpsons alone. But there is a third name that rarely gets the attention it deserves, and that name is Sam Simon. Simon was listed alongside Groening and Brooks as a developer of the series. He served as the show's creative supervisor for its first 4 seasons, from the premiere in 1989 through the end of Season 4 in 1993. And according to virtually everyone who worked on the show during that period, Simon was the person most responsible for building the comedic engine that made The Simpsons the greatest animated series ever produced. Sam Simon assembled the original writing staff. He hired the people who would go on to create the show's most iconic episodes. He established the writer's room culture that valued sharp, fast comedy layered with emotional depth. He set the tone for how the show balanced absurdist humor with genuine heart. He was, in the words of many former colleagues, the architect of the show's comedic sensibility during the years that are now universally referred to as the Golden Age. Despite this, Simon is consistently undercredited in public discussions about The Simpsons. When the media covers the show, they talk about Groening's characters and Brooks' producing genius. Simon's name appears in the credits, but casual fans often have no idea who he was or what he contributed. This disparity has been noted by industry insiders and Simpsons historians for years, and it represents one of the more frustrating gaps between public perception and creative reality in television history. Simon left The Simpsons after Season 4, which ended in 1993. The reasons for his departure were not a single dramatic incident, but rather a gradual accumulation of creative differences and interpersonal friction. By the time he left, the show was already established as a massive hit, and the writing staff he had assembled was more than capable of continuing without him. Here is where Simon's story takes an unusual turn. When he left the show, Simon retained his executive producer credit and his profit share. This meant that for the rest of his life, he continued to earn money from every new episode of The Simpsons, every syndication deal, every merchandise royalty, and every other revenue stream the franchise generated. He earned this money despite not working on the show in any capacity after 1993. The arrangement was essentially a permanent royalty tied to his foundational contribution to the series. This profit share made Simon enormously wealthy. He used that wealth in ways that set him apart from most people in the entertainment industry. Simon became one of the most generous philanthropists in Hollywood, and with a particular focus on animal rights. He founded the Sam Simon Foundation, which rescued dogs from shelters, trained them, and placed them with disabled veterans and other people in need. He donated millions to organizations fighting hunger and animal cruelty. He funded feeding programs that provided meals to people across the country. Sam Simon was diagnosed with terminal colon cancer in 2012. He was given 3 to 6 months to live. He survived far longer than anyone expected, continuing his philanthropic work throughout his illness. He died on the 8th of March, 2015, at the age of 59. In the years since his death, Simon's legacy has been gradually reassessed. People who worked with him during the early years of The Simpsons have spoken more openly about his contributions, and a clearer picture has emerged of just how important he was to the show's success. He was the person who took Groening's characters and Brooks' institutional support and built the actual machine that produced the comedy. Without Sam Simon, The Simpsons would have had the same characters and the same network backing, but it might not have had the writing staff, the comedic rhythms, or the emotional depth that turned it into the most influential animated series in history. The writing staff that Simon assembled and the culture he established continued to produce brilliant work long after he left. 154 people have been credited with writing or co-writing at least one episode of The Simpsons as of January 2026. John Swartzwelder alone has 59 writing credits, more than any other individual. The sheer volume of creative talent that has passed through the show's writer's room is staggering, and it all traces back to the foundation that Sam Simon laid in the show's first 4 years. Simon's story is a reminder that the people who build the foundations of great things are not always the people who get the credit. Matt Groening designed the characters, James L. Brooks provided the platform, but Sam Simon built the engine, and then he walked away while the engine kept running for decades without him. He earned his share of the profits, spent that money making the world better for animals and people in need, and died at 59 from cancer. The show he helped create is still airing new episodes today, and most of the people watching have never heard his name. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the Disney Plus aspect ratio controversy, the streaming war for The Simpsons, and what was lost when they cropped a masterpiece. On the 12th of November 2019, Disney launched its streaming platform, Disney Plus. The service was positioned as the home for everything Disney, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, and National Geographic. But it also carried another property that many people did not associate with Disney at all. The Simpsons. When Disney acquired 21st Century Fox in 2019, it inherited the entire Simpsons catalog along with everything else Fox had produced. The Simpsons became one of the flagship titles on Disney Plus, with all 30-plus completed seasons available on the platform from day one. This was a massive deal for fans. For the first time, every episode of The Simpsons was available in one place, accessible through a single streaming subscription. No more hunting through different syndication channels, no more buying individual DVD box sets. The entire history of the show, from the premiere episode Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire on the 17th of December, 1989, through the most recent completed season, was there for anyone to watch. But there was a problem, a serious one, and fans noticed it almost immediately. The Simpsons was produced in a 4:3 standard definition aspect ratio for its first 19 seasons, from season 1 through season 19. This is the boxy, nearly square shape that was standard for television before widescreen high definition became the norm. The show's animators composed their shots specifically for this format. They used the entire frame, including the top and bottom edges to place visual gags, background details, and joke elements that would only be visible if you were seeing the full 4:3 image. When Disney Plus launched, every episode of The Simpsons was presented in a 16:9 widescreen format, the wider rectangular shape that is standard for modern high-definition television. For episodes from season 20 onward, this was fine, because those episodes were originally produced in widescreen. But for the first 19 seasons, the 16:9 presentation meant that the original 4:3 footage was being cropped. The top and bottom of the frame were cut off to make the image fill a widescreen display. This was not a minor cosmetic adjustment. The cropping actively destroyed visual gags that the show's writers and animators had carefully placed in those portions of the frame, and jokes that depended on what was visible at the top or bottom of the screen simply vanished. A sign in the background that contained the punchline of a joke would be cut in half. A character doing something funny at the edge of the frame would disappear entirely. The composition of shots that had been designed for a specific shape was altered in ways that changed what the viewer could see and understand. The backlash from fans was immediate and intense. Social media filled with side-by-side comparisons showing what the episodes looked like in their original 4:3 format versus the cropped 16:9 version on Disney Plus. Fans documented specific visual gags that had been destroyed by the cropping, providing frame-by-frame evidence of what was being lost. The anger was not just about aesthetics. It was about the fundamental principle that a work of art should be presented in the format its creators intended. Disney responded. On the 28th of May, 2020, approximately 6 months after the initial launch, Disney Plus restored a 4:3 viewing option for the older episodes. Users could now toggle a setting called Remastered to switch between the cropped 16:9 version and the original 4:3 format. This resolved the immediate problem, but the fact that it took 6 months and significant public pressure to fix something that should never have been broken in the first place frustrated many fans. The idea that anyone at Disney had looked at 19 seasons of carefully composed animation and decided to crop it without consulting the show's creators was seen as emblematic of the problems with corporate streaming. Despite the aspect ratio controversy, The Simpsons became one of the most watched properties on Disney Plus. In December 2025, Disney announced that The Simpsons had surpassed 1 billion hours streamed on the platform during 2025 alone. 1 billion hours. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of viewing time. To put it in perspective, 1 billion hours is equivalent to more than 114,000 years of continuous Simpsons watching. Nielsen, the company that tracks television viewership, reported that The Simpsons was the 10th most streamed acquired program of 2022, accumulating 15.87 billion minutes of watch time across the year. These streaming numbers reveal something important about the show's cultural position. While live viewership of new Simpsons episodes has declined significantly over the decades, dropping from tens of millions in the early 1990s to roughly 2 to 4 million for recent seasons, the show's catalog remains extraordinarily popular. People may not be watching new episodes live on Fox on Sunday nights the way they used to, but they are binge-watching old episodes on Disney Plus in enormous numbers. The Simpsons' past is, in many ways, more commercially valuable than its present. Disney also launched a 24/7 always-on Simpsons stream on Disney Plus in March 2025, which cycles through every episode from seasons 1 through 35 continuously. This is essentially a virtual television channel dedicated entirely to The Simpsons, recreating the experience of flipping on the TV and finding Simpsons reruns playing, which was a staple of cable television for decades through syndication on channels like FX and FXX. The streaming era has also changed how the show reaches new audiences. Young people who were not alive when the show premiered in 1989 are discovering it for the first time through Disney Plus. They are watching episodes from the Golden Age, seasons 2 through 8, that aired decades before they were born, and they are falling in love with the same jokes and characters that captivated audiences in the 1990s. The Simpsons is experiencing a kind of immortality through streaming, where every episode ever produced is permanently available and every generation gets to discover the show on their own terms. But the aspect ratio controversy served as a warning. The show's legacy is not just about the stories and the jokes. It is about the specific way those stories and jokes were presented visually. When you crop a Simpsons episode from 4 to 3 to 16 to 9, you are not just adjusting a technical setting, you are removing content that the creators put there on purpose. You are altering art. And in a show where visual gags are as important as the dialogue, altering the image means altering the comedy itself. The 4 to 3 restoration was a victory for preservation. But the fact that it was necessary at all spoke to a larger problem with how corporate streaming platforms treat the creative legacy of the content they acquire. The early 1990s also brought a completely different kind of controversy for the show, one that seems almost quaint by modern standards, but was genuinely heated at the time. When The Simpsons first became a cultural phenomenon, a significant backlash emerged from parents, school administrators, and conservative commentators who argued that Bart Simpson was a terrible role model for children. Bart's rebellious attitude, his disrespect for authority, his catchphrases like "eat my shorts" and "don't have a cow, man," and his general contempt for education and discipline were seen as encouraging bad behavior in young viewers. Some schools actually banned Bart Simpson merchandise. Students were not allowed to wear t-shirts featuring Bart or his catchphrases. Teachers and principals gave interviews expressing concern that children were imitating Bart's attitude towards school and authority figures. The controversy reached the highest levels of American politics when President George H.W. Bush, during a speech in 1992, and said that American families needed to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. The show responded in characteristic fashion. In a segment that aired shortly after Bush's comments, Bart watched the speech on television and quipped that they were just like the Waltons because they were praying for an end to the Depression too. The show later devoted an entire episode, Two Bad Neighbors in Season 7, to satirizing Bush by having a fictionalized version of the former president move in across the street from The Simpsons. The idea that a cartoon character could be considered a genuine threat to American family values seems absurd today. But in the early 1990s, it was a very real cultural flashpoint. The Simpsons was not just a television show. It was a battleground in the ongoing culture war between traditionalists who valued authority and obedience, and a younger generation that valued irreverence and questioning the status quo. Bart Simpson became a symbol for that divide, and the show's willingness to mock the people who criticized it only made the divide sharper. Another controversy that deserves mention involves one of the show's most iconic recurring visual gags. For decades, a running joke on The Simpsons has been Homer strangling Bart. The gag shows Homer wrapping his hands around Bart's neck and squeezing while Bart makes a gagging sound, usually in response to something Bart has said or done to annoy Homer. The gag has appeared in dozens of episodes and is considered one of the show's signature bits of physical comedy. In 2024, a discussion arose in the media about whether the show was retiring the strangling gag. A season 35 episode appeared to reference the gag in a way that suggested it might be changing. Some media outlets reported that The Simpsons was finally acknowledging that Homer's physical abuse of his son was not appropriate material for a family comedy. Executive producer James L. Brooks responded firmly and directly. He denied that any change was being made, saying, "Don't think for a second we're changing anything." The strangling gag would continue, just as it always had. The incident highlighted the ongoing tension between the show's comedic traditions and evolving cultural standards. What was considered acceptable comedy in 1989 when the show premiered is viewed through a very different lens in the 2020s. A father repeatedly strangling his 10-year-old son for laughs would never be introduced in a new show today. But The Simpsons has been doing it for over 35 years, and it has become so deeply embedded in the show's identity that removing it would feel like removing Homer's donut or Bart's skateboard. The show has chosen to stand by its traditions even as the culture shifts around it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the production machine behind The Simpsons, how 6 months of work goes into every single episode, and the staggering scale of what it takes to keep a show running for 37 years. Most people who watch The Simpsons have no idea how complicated it is to make a single episode of the show. They see 21 to 24 minutes of animated comedy and assume it was produced relatively quickly, perhaps in a few weeks or a month. The reality is that every single episode of The Simpsons takes approximately 6 months to produce from start to finish. 6 months for 22 minutes of content. The production pipeline is long and involves multiple stages that all overlap with each other, meaning that at any given time, the show has several episodes in various stages of development simultaneously. The process begins with outlining. The writer's room gathers and pitches story ideas. These ideas are debated, shaped, and narrowed down to the ones that will become actual episodes. Once an idea is selected, it goes through an initial outlining phase where the broad strokes of the story are mapped out, including the main plot, the subplots, and the general structure of each act. From there, the outline is turned into a draft script. The writer assigned to the episode produces a first draft, which is then brought back to the room for table reads and rewrites. The Simpsons is notorious for its extensive rewriting process. Scripts go through multiple drafts, with the writing staff collectively reworking jokes, restructuring scenes, and punching up dialogue. The rewriting process is not optional, and it is not gentle. Even the best initial drafts are heavily modified by the time they reach final form. After the script is finalized, the voice actors record their dialogue. The Simpsons' main cast typically records together in a group session, which allows for natural interaction and improvisation. Dan Castellaneta, who voices Homer, is known for improvising some of Homer's signature verbal quirks, including his stuttering, his repetition of Bart's name, and his general verbal fumbling. Julie Kavner brings a naturalistic quality to Marge that comes from working off the energy of the other actors in the room. The group recording sessions create a dynamic that would be impossible to replicate if each actor recorded in isolation. Once the dialogue is recorded, the animation process begins. This is where the majority of the 6-month timeline is spent. The first step is creating animatics, which are rough, storyboard-level animations that show the basic movement and timing of each scene set against the recorded dialogue. The animatics are reviewed by the producers and directors who make notes about timing, pacing, and staging. Adjustments are made, and then the animatics are sent out for full animation. The animation history of The Simpsons is a story in itself. The show has gone through 3 major animation studios over its run. The first was Klasky Csupo, a studio founded by Gabor Csupo and Arlene Klasky, who are also known for creating Rugrats. Klasky Csupo animated the original Tracy Ullman Show shorts and the first 3 seasons of The Simpsons, from 1989 through 1992. The animation style during this period was rougher, more fluid, and less polished than what the show would later become. Characters were slightly off-model, movements were more exaggerated, and the overall look had a handmade quality that reflected the state of television animation at the time. The early seasons actually faced significant production challenges. The intended premiere episode, In Some Enchanted Evening, had to be delayed because the animation quality was so poor that it was deemed unacceptable for broadcast. Starting with Season 4 in 1992, animation production moved to Film Roman, a studio that would handle the show for the next 23 seasons through Season 27 in 2016. Film Roman refined The Simpsons' visual style into the clean, consistent look that most people associate with the show. Characters became more standardized, movements became smoother, and the overall production quality increased substantially. Film Roman's tenure coincided with the show's golden age and the decades that followed, making it the studio most closely associated with the show's visual identity. Beginning with season 28 in 2016, animation production moved in-house to Fox Television Animation, on which later became 20th Television Animation after Disney's acquisition of Fox. The show is now animated by the same corporate entity that produces it, which has streamlined the production process and given the creative team more direct control over the animation quality. Throughout all of these changes, a significant portion of the actual frame-by-frame animation work has been outsourced to studios in South Korea. Companies like ACOM, Rough Draft Studios, and Animavision have handled the labor-intensive tasks of in-between animation, tweening, coloring, and filming. This is the grunt work of animation, the process of taking the keyframes created by the American animators and filling in all the movements between them to create smooth, fluid motion. This outsourcing model is standard in the American animation industry and has been used by virtually every major animated series since the 1960s. The creative decisions are made in Los Angeles, but the physical production of thousands of individual frames is completed overseas. One of the most significant technical transitions in the show's history was the move from traditional cell animation to digital production. For the first 13 seasons, The Simpsons was produced using traditional cell animation, a process in which artists drew each frame by hand on paper. The drawings were transferred to transparent celluloid sheets called cells. The cells were painted by hand and then photographed against painted backgrounds. This process was painstaking, time-consuming, and expensive, but it produced a warmth and texture that digital animation struggles to replicate. The show first experimented with digital animation techniques on the season 7 episode Radioactive Man in 1995, and again on the season 12 episode Tennis the Menace. The full transition to digital ink and paint happened during season 14, starting with the episode The Great Louse Detective. From that point forward, the show is animated entirely using digital tools. The hand-painted cells were gone forever, replaced by computer coloring and digital compositing. The other major technical transition was the move to high-definition production. For the first 19 seasons, The Simpsons was produced in standard definition with a 4:3 aspect ratio. Starting midway through season 20, the show switched to high-definition 16:9 widescreen production. The first episode broadcast in this format was Take My Life, Please, which aired on the 15th of February 2009. This episode also introduced a new opening sequence that had been redesigned for the widescreen format. The budget for all of this production work is substantial. As of 2011 estimates, each episode of The Simpsons cost approximately $5 million to produce. This figure includes the salaries of the voice cast, the writing staff, the animators, the producers, the composers, and all the other creative and technical personnel involved in production. It also includes the costs of recording studios, animation facilities, post-production work, and distribution. $5 million per episode might sound like a lot, but for a show that generates billions in total franchise revenue, it is a relatively modest production cost. The show's production has been disrupted by external events on several occasions. The 2007 and 2008 Writers Guild of America strike affected season 19, which was shortened to 20 episodes instead of the usual 22 or 24. The COVID-19 pandemic forced production to move entirely remote in March 2020 during season 32. Remarkably, the show did not miss any episodes. The voice cast recorded from home studios that they set up in their houses. Table reads were conducted over video calls. The writing staff continued working remotely. The show adapted quickly and efficiently, demonstrating the resilience of a production team that had been working together for decades. More recently, the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike affected season 35, which was reduced to 18 episodes. Because animated shows require such long lead times, with episodes taking 6 months to produce, the impact of the strike on broadcast schedules was less severe than for live-action shows that can produce episodes much more quickly. the showrunner history of The Simpsons is another layer of the production story that deserves attention. The show has had a succession of creative leaders who each put their stamp on the series, and the transitions between them have defined the different eras that fans recognize. The first few seasons were collaborative, with Matt Groening, James L. Brooks, and Sam Simon sharing creative control. Al Jean and Mike Rice then co-ran seasons 3 and 4, which is often considered the beginning of the golden age. The comedy sharpened, the pace increased, and the show found the precise balance of humor and emotion that made it legendary. David Merkin took over for seasons 5 and 6, pushing the show in a more surreal and experimental direction. Homer went to space. Sideshow Bob chased Bart down a houseboat in the unforgettable Cape Fear. The show became bolder and weirder under Merkin's leadership. Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein co-ran seasons 7 and 8, which many fans consider the absolute peak of the show. These seasons produced Homer's Enemy, You Only Move Twice with the fan-favorite villain Hank Scorpio, 22 short films about Springfield which included the legendary Steamed Ham sketch, and The Springfield Files, the X-Files crossover that featured David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson as Fox Mulder and Dana Scully. The Oakley-Weinstein era also deepened the show's exploration of secondary characters, giving Springfield's supporting cast their own spotlight episodes. Then came Mike Scully, who ran seasons 9 through 12. The Scully era is one of the most debated periods in the show's history. Under Scully's leadership, the show became broader, wackier, and more celebrity-focused. Homer's characterization shifted from a well-meaning but flawed everyman to what fans call jerkass Homer, a more reckless and selfish version of the character who did outrageous things for cheap laughs. The Scully era produced some popular episodes, but it also produced The Principal and the Pauper in season 9, an episode that retroactively changed Principal Skinner's entire backstory by revealing he was actually an imposter named Armin Tamzarian, who stole the real Seymour Skinner's identity after the Vietnam War. This episode is frequently cited as the beginning of the show's decline and a turning point where the writers stopped caring about continuity and character integrity. Al Jean returned as showrunner for season 13 in 2001, and he would hold the position for an extraordinary 20 seasons through season 32 in 2021. The Al Jean era is the longest single showrunner tenure in the show's history, and it represents the bulk of the show's existence. Jean's approach was more conservative than Scully's, focusing on stability and longevity rather than creative risk-taking. Under Jean, the show continued producing competent, watchable episodes, but few that reached the heights of the golden age. The Jean era saw the transition to digital animation, the switch to HD, the 500th episode, the 600th episode, the surpassing of Gunsmoke's episode count record, and hundreds of celebrity guest appearances. Matt Selman, who had been co-running episodes since season 23, took over as the primary showrunner starting with season 33 in 2021. Selman's tenure has been characterized by a creative renaissance of sorts, with format-breaking episodes, non-linear storytelling, and a more cinematic visual style. The show has felt more ambitious under Selman than it had in years. Al Jean was announced as moving to a consulting producer role, and Selman was confirmed as sole showrunner from season 38 onward. Beyond the television series, if the show's production history also includes one of the most ambitious animated films ever made. The Simpsons movie was released on the 27th of July, 2007, directed by David Silverman and written by an unprecedented 11 writers, including James L. Brooks, Matt Groening, Al Jean, Mike Scully, George Meyer, David Merkin, Mike Rice, Matt Selman, John Swartzwelder, John Vitti, and Ian Maxtone Graham. The film took years to develop and had been discussed, planned, and abandoned multiple times before it finally reached production. The movie's plot centered on Homer inadvertently polluting Springfield's lake so badly that the Environmental Protection Agency, led by a villain named Russ Cargill, voiced by Albert Brooks, encased the entire town under a giant dome. The family escaped Springfield, but Homer had to return to save the town from destruction. The film was rated PG-13, a step up from the show's usual TV-PG rating, and it pushed the boundaries of what Simpsons content could include, featuring a brief moment of Bart's full frontal nudity that became one of the film's most talked about scenes. The Simpsons movie was a massive commercial success, grossing approximately $527 million worldwide against a production budget of approximately $75 million. It was the 8th highest grossing film of 2007 and the 2nd highest grossing traditionally animated film of all time at that point, behind only The Lion King. Critical reception was strong, with an 87% score on Rotten Tomatoes and an 80 on Metacritic. Hans Zimmer composed the film's score, giving it a grander musical scope than any individual television episode. A sequel to The Simpsons movie has been in discussion for years. As of the most recent information available, The Simpsons 2, as it has been tentatively titled, has an expected release date of the 3rd of September 2027. Beyond the listing, specific details about the title, plot, and production status remain largely unverified, but the fact that a second Simpsons film is in development suggests that the franchise's theatrical potential has not been exhausted. The scale of what has been produced over 37 seasons is staggering when you step back and look at the numbers. Over 800 episodes, each one taking 6 months. Each one involving writers, animators, voice actors, directors, composers, editors, and technical staff across multiple countries, each one costing millions of dollars. Each one reviewed, revised, and refined through a process that has remained fundamentally the same since the show's first season in 1989. The Simpsons is not just a television show. It is an industrial operation, a machine that has been running continuously for over 3.5 decades, producing content at a pace and scale that few other creative enterprises in human history can match. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the final section of this video, we have the show that will never end, the records it holds, the audience it lost, the cultural empire it built, and what it means for a television show to outlive its own golden age. The Simpsons has been renewed through season 40. This was announced on the 2nd of April, 2025. No cancellation has ever been announced. The show has been in continuous production since its premiere on the 17th of December, 1989. It has never been off the air for longer than a standard between seasons break. It has never been formally put on hiatus. It has never been threatened with cancellation in any public and official capacity, except during the 2011 salary dispute. And even then, the threat was a negotiation tactic rather than a genuine creative decision to end the series. The Simpsons simply continues. It keeps going. Year after year, season after season, episode after episode, the machine runs and the show appears on Fox every Sunday night during the broadcast season, and it shows no signs of stopping. The records the show holds are at this point almost absurd in their scope. The Simpsons is the longest-running primetime animated television series in history. It is the longest-running American sitcom by number of episodes. It is the longest-running American scripted primetime television series by both number of seasons and number of episodes. It surpassed Gunsmoke's record of 635 episodes with the episode Forgive and Regret, which aired on the 29th of April, 2018, claiming the all-time record for highest episode count among American primetime scripted shows. As of December 2025, over 800 episodes have aired. The Simpsons holds the Guinness World Record for the most guest stars featured in a television series, with 810 unique guest stars as of the 22nd of April, 2020. That number has continued to grow since that count was taken, and it also holds the record for the most Emmy Awards won by an animated series. Its combined awards tally stands at 187 wins and 382 nominations as of early 2026 across all award ceremonies. The guest star list alone reads like a who's who of global celebrity. Michael Jackson, credited as John J. Smith, voiced a character in Season 3. Dustin Hoffman, credited under the pseudonym Sam Ettick, voiced Lisa's substitute teacher, Mr. Bergstrom, in one of the show's most emotionally affecting episodes. Elizabeth Taylor voiced the first word Baby Maggie ever spoke on the show, the word daddy, in the Season 4 episode Lisa's First Word. Leonard Nimoy appeared as himself in the Monorail episode and again in the X-Files crossover. Albert Brooks has returned multiple times, most notably as the supervillain Hank Scorpio in You Only Move Twice, and as Russ Cargill in The Simpsons movie. Kelsey Grammer has voiced Sideshow Bob in over 20 episodes spanning the show's entire run. Paul and Linda McCartney appeared as themselves in Lisa the Vegetarian, with one condition, that Lisa would remain a vegetarian permanently. The show has honored that agreement, and Lisa has not eaten meat since. Johnny Cash voiced a mystical space coyote. Stephen Hawking appeared as himself multiple times. Tom Hanks appeared in The Simpsons movie. Lady Gaga appeared in what became the show's lowest-rated episode of all time, Lisa Goes Gaga, in Season 23. The sheer volume of celebrity involvement in The Simpsons reflects something important about the show's cultural status. For decades, appearing on The Simpsons was considered a badge of honor in the entertainment industry. Actors, musicians, athletes, scientists, and politicians all sought out opportunities to lend their voices to the show. A Simpsons appearance signaled that you had reached a level of fame and cultural relevance that the show's writers considered worth satirizing or celebrating. The guest star record is not just a number, it is a measure of how deeply The Simpsons penetrated the fabric of popular culture. But while the records keep growing, the audience has been shrinking. This is the uncomfortable reality that sits underneath all the celebration. The Simpsons' viewership has declined dramatically over the course of its run. The most watched episode in the show's history is Bart Gets an F, the first episode of Season 2, which aired on the 11th of October, 1990. That episode was watched by approximately 33.6 million viewers, making it the highest-rated program in Fox network history at the time. It beat The Cosby Show in the ratings, which was an astonishing achievement for a new animated series on a fledgling broadcast network. During its peak popularity in seasons 2 through 4, The Simpsons was a top 30 program nationally. It was appointment television, the kind of show that people planned their Sunday evenings around. Families gathered in their living rooms to watch new episodes together. Offices buzzed with discussion about the previous night's episode on Monday mornings. The show generated a cultural phenomenon known as Simpson Mania that touched every aspect of American life, from fashion to language to politics. That era is long gone. Like most broadcast television, The Simpsons has experienced a steady and significant decline in live viewership. Recent seasons average approximately 2 to 4 million live viewers per episode. Season 34 averaged less than 2 million viewers per episode on the linear broadcast. Compare that to the 33.6 million who watched Bart Gets an F, and you can see the magnitude of the decline. The show went from being watched by 1 out of every 8 Americans to being watched by roughly 1 out of every 160. That is not a gradual erosion. That is a transformation in the show's relationship with its audience. The premiere episode of the series, Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, drew approximately 26.7 million viewers on the 17th of December, 1989. Some sources report a lower number, possibly reflecting household counts versus total viewer counts. But by any measure, the premiere was a massive hit for the Fox network. It was unprecedented for a new animated series to draw those numbers, and it immediately established The Simpsons as a cultural force. The decline in live viewership is not unique to The Simpsons. It reflects broader changes in how people consume television. The rise of cable television in the 1990s, the advent of DVR technology in the 2000s, and the explosion of streaming services in the 2010s all contributed to the fragmentation of the broadcast television audience. Fewer people watch any show live anymore, and the entire concept of appointment television has been replaced by on-demand viewing. The Simpsons is a victim of the same structural forces that have reduced the live audiences of virtually every broadcast television program. But there is a counter-argument to the doom and gloom narrative about declining viewership, and it is a powerful one. The Simpsons may have lost its broadcast audience, but it has gained something else. It has become one of the most valuable catalog properties in the history of entertainment. The streaming numbers tell a very different story than the live broadcast ratings. 1 billion hours streamed on Disney Plus in 2025. 15.87 billion minutes of watch time reported by Nielsen in 2022 alone. The Simpsons is not dying. It is being consumed differently. The audience did not disappear. It migrated to a different platform and a different mode of viewing. This distinction matters because it explains why the show continues to be renewed, despite ratings that would have gotten any other broadcast series canceled decades ago. The Simpsons is not being kept alive by its Sunday night broadcast audience. It is being kept alive by its value as a streaming asset, a merchandise engine, a theme park attraction, a licensing goldmine, and a cultural institution that generates revenue across dozens of different platforms and products. The new episodes that air on Fox serve a dual purpose. They keep the franchise current and relevant, and they add to the catalog that viewers binge on Disney Plus. Each new episode is an investment in the show's eternal afterlife. The economic engine of the Simpsons franchise extends far beyond television. The show has generated an estimated $13 billion in total franchise revenue over its lifetime. This includes television advertising revenue, domestic and international syndication deals, home video sales on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray, digital download and streaming revenue, merchandise licensing that covers everything from clothing to toys to video games to household items, theme park attractions at Universal Studios in multiple countries, a theatrically released film that grossed over $500 million, publishing deals for books and comics, and countless other revenue streams that have been built on the backs of Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie Simpson. The merchandise alone has been $1 billion industry. In the early 1990s, during the height of Simpson mania, Bart Simpson's face was everywhere. T-shirts, lunchboxes, posters, bumper stickers, action figures, board games, video games, and hundreds of other products flooded the market. The Eat My Shorts and Don't Have a Cowman t-shirts became iconic fashion statements for an entire generation of young people. The merchandise revenue during the show's peak years was staggering, and while it has declined from those heights, it remains a significant ongoing business. The theme park presence is another major revenue stream. The Simpsons ride, originally called the Simpsons ride, and replacing the classic Back to the Future ride, opened at Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Florida. Springfield-themed areas were built at the parks, featuring Krusty Burger, Moe's Tavern, the Quick E-Mart, and other recognizable Springfield landmarks. Visitors can walk through a physical recreation of the town they have watched on television for decades, buy Duff beer, eat at Luigi's, and immerse themselves in the world of the show. The theme park attractions generate millions in revenue annually and serve as three-dimensional advertisements for the franchise. The syndication history of The Simpsons is another dimension of its economic impact. The show has been sold to virtually every television market on Earth. It has been dubbed into dozens of languages and broadcast in over 100 countries. In the United States, syndication deals have placed reruns on multiple cable networks over the years, including Fox's own cable channels, FX and FXX. FXX famously staged a marathon event in 2014 called Every Simpsons Ever, which broadcast all existing episodes of the show back to back. The marathon ran for 12 consecutive days and generated significant viewership and media attention. It was the longest, continuous marathon of a single television show ever broadcast. The cultural footprint of The Simpsons is almost impossible to overstate. The show has contributed words and phrases to the English language that are now used by people who have never watched a single episode. Dough, Homer's signature exclamation of frustration, was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2001. Cromulent, a word invented by the show's writers meaning acceptable or fine, has entered common usage. Embiggen, another invented word meaning to make bigger or more significant, was used in a scientific paper and has been referenced in other television shows. Mia, an expression of indifference that the show popularized, though it did not invent, has become a standard part of the internet vocabulary. The show has influenced virtually every animated series that followed it. Without The Simpsons proving that an animated series could appeal to adults, sustain a primetime audience, and generate billions in revenue, shows like South Park, Family Guy, Futurama, King of the Hill, Bob's Burgers, Rick and Morty, Archer, and dozens of others might never have existed, or at least would not have had the market opportunity that The Simpsons created. Matt Groening and his collaborators did not just make a successful show, they created an entire category of programming that did not exist before them. Adult animated comedy is a genre that The Simpsons essentially invented for American primetime television. And that genre now generates billions of dollars annually across multiple networks and streaming platforms. The show's influence on comedy writing is equally profound. Generations of comedy writers have cited The Simpsons as their primary influence. The show's layered approach to humor, where a single scene might contain a sight gag, a verbal joke, a background reference, and an emotional beat all at the same time, became the template for how sophisticated comedy is written. The density of jokes per minute in a peak-era Simpsons episode is extraordinary. Writers have estimated that a single episode from the Golden Age might contain more individual jokes than an entire season of a typical sitcom. This density forced other shows to raise their game, and the overall quality of television comedy improved as a result. The Simpsons has also been a vehicle for social commentary that has addressed virtually every major issue in American public life. The show has tackled gun control in The Cartridge Family, gay marriage in There's Something About Marrying, immigration in Much Apu About Nothing, religious hypocrisy in dozens of episodes, environmental destruction, corporate greed, political corruption, media manipulation, educational failure, healthcare dysfunction, and the general absurdity of the American experience. It has done all of this through comedy, wrapping serious observations about the state of the country in jokes that make the medicine go down. The episode Homer's Phobia from Season 8 deserves special mention in this context. In that episode, where Homer befriends a man named John, voiced by filmmaker John Waters, who is gay. Homer does not initially realize this and enjoys John's company. When he discovers John is gay, Homer panics and tries to cure Bart of homosexuality by taking him to a steel mill, which turns out to be staffed entirely by gay men. The episode earned a GLAAD Media Award for its portrayal of a homophobic character learning tolerance, and it remains one of the most celebrated episodes in the show's history for its handling of LGBTQ issues. This was 1997. The episode aired years before gay marriage was legalized in any U.S. state and more than a decade before the cultural mainstream caught up with the show's message. The show's relationship with the American presidency is another fascinating thread. Beyond the George H.W. Bush incident in 1992, where the president criticized the show and the show clapped back with a joke about praying for an end to the Depression, The Simpsons has engaged with every subsequent administration. The show predicted Trump's presidency. It has satirized both Democrats and Republicans with equal enthusiasm. Springfield's own Mayor Quimby, a corrupt, womanizing politician voiced by Dan Castellaneta with a heavy Kennedy-esque accent, serves as a permanent commentary on the state of American political leadership. Quimby has been mayor of Springfield for over 35 years. which may be the most realistic prediction the show has ever made about the nature of political power. Now here's the question that hangs over everything. What does it mean for a show to outlive its own golden age? The Simpsons' best years, by near universal critical consensus, were somewhere between seasons 2 and 8. Some fans extend the golden period through season 10 or 12, and others draw the line even earlier. But virtually nobody argues that the show is as good today as it was in 1995. The writing is competent but rarely brilliant. The jokes land but rarely surprise. The emotional beats hit their marks but rarely devastate the way they once did. The show is watchable, enjoyable even, but it is not the revolutionary force of nature that it was during its peak. This is not unique to The Simpsons. Every long-running show faces the challenge of creative entropy. The longer a show runs, the harder it becomes to find new stories to tell, new jokes to make, and new territory to explore. The Simpsons has over 800 episodes. It has explored virtually every conceivable storyline for its characters. Homer has had hundreds of jobs. Bart has been in trouble in every way imaginable. Lisa has confronted every social issue that exists. Marge has been pushed to her breaking point and recovered dozens of times. At some point, the well of new ideas runs dry and the show begins recycling concepts with slight variations. The counter-argument is that the show does not need to be as good as it was in 1995 to justify its existence. It provides employment for hundreds of people. It generates revenue for its corporate parent. It gives fans new content every year. It adds to a catalog that people stream by the billion hours. And every once in a while, it produces an episode that reminds everyone why the show mattered in the first place. A flash of the old brilliance that cuts through the routine competence and reminds you that underneath the 37 seasons of accumulated history, the same fundamental creative engine is still running. It may not run as hot as it once did, but it has not stopped. The Simpsons exists in a strange cultural space that no other show has ever occupied. It is simultaneously a beloved classic and a current production. It is a nostalgic touchstone for people who grew up watching it in the 1990s and a new discovery for teenagers finding it on Disney Plus today. It is a commercial juggernaut that generates billions and a creative enterprise that many argue peaked decades ago. It is the most awarded animated series in history and a show whose recent seasons barely register in the cultural conversation. It is all of these things at once, and it will continue to be all of these things for as long as Fox and Disney decide to keep making new episodes. The show's creators have been remarkably transparent about this tension. Al Jean, who ran the show for 20 years, has acknowledged that no show can maintain its peak quality indefinitely. Matt Selman, the current showrunner, has spoken about trying to push the show in new creative directions while respecting its legacy. The writers know that every new episode will be compared to the Golden Age, and most of those comparisons will be unfavorable. They make the show anyway because the show is their job and their passion, and because stopping feels like giving up on something that has defined their careers. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the origin story of The Simpsons itself, how a series of crude animated shorts on a variety show became the most successful animated franchise in television history. Most people know The Simpsons as a Fox show that started in 1989. What most people do not know is that the Simpson family existed for 2 full years before the show premiered, appearing as short animated segments on a completely different television program. On the 19th of April, 1987, the Simpson family made their first public appearance on The Tracey Ullman Show, a sketch comedy variety series starring British comedian Tracey Ullman on the Fox network. Matt Groening had been brought in to create short animated segments that would serve as bumpers between the show's live-action comedy sketches. Groening later said that he came up with the Simpson family in the lobby of James L. Brooks' office, minutes before a meeting where he was supposed to pitch his comic strip Life in Hell as the basis for the animated shorts. He realized at the last moment that adapting life in hell would mean giving up the rights to his comic strip characters. So he improvised. He quickly sketched a family of 5, named them after members of his own family, Homer, Marge, Lisa, and Maggie, with the exception of Bart, whose name is an anagram of brat, and pitched them instead. 48 shorts featuring the Simpson family aired on the Tracy Ullman Show between 1987 and 1989. These shorts were crude by any standard. The animation was rough, the character designs were not yet finalized, and the voices were still being developed. Homer looked different than he would in the eventual series. The characters moved stiffly, the comedy was simple and sketch-based rather than the layered, narratively complex humor that the show would later become known for. But even in these primitive shorts, something was clearly working. The characters had chemistry. The family dynamics felt authentic despite the rudimentary animation. And audiences responded. James L. Brooks saw the potential in these shorts and pushed for them to be developed into a full half-hour series. Fox agreed, and The Simpsons was greenlit as a standalone animated series. The premiere episode, Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, was a Christmas special that aired on the 17th of December, 1989. In the episode, Homer discovers that his Christmas bonus has been canceled and secretly takes a job as a mall Santa Claus to afford presents for his family. The episode ends with the family adopting a retired racing greyhound named Santa's Little Helper. It was a simple, warm story, and it drew approximately 26.7 million viewers, an extraordinary number for a new animated series on a network that was itself only 3 years old. The show found its footing quickly. The first season was 13 episodes, and while the animation was still rough compared to what would come later, the writing was already sharp. By the second season, the show had found its emotional core. Episodes like Lisa's Substitute, and where Lisa bonds with a charismatic temporary teacher voiced by Dustin Hoffman under a pseudonym and then has to say goodbye when he leaves, showed that the show could be genuinely moving without sacrificing its comedy. Bart Gets an F, the Season 2 premiere, drew 33.6 million viewers and became the highest-rated program in Fox network history. The Simpsons was no longer just a successful animated show, it was a national phenomenon. The first Treehouse of Horror also aired in Season 2, establishing the annual Halloween tradition that would continue for over 3 decades. The show expanded its universe rapidly, introducing characters who would become permanent fixtures of Springfield. Sideshow Bob made his first appearance. Mr. Burns' villainy was deepened. Krusty the Clown's dysfunctional celebrity was explored. The supporting cast grew from a handful of recurring faces to a sprawling population of dozens, then hundreds of distinct characters, each with their own personality, voice, and comedic function. By seasons 3 and 4, the show had entered what is now recognized as the beginning of its golden age. The comedy sharpened dramatically, the pace increased, the jokes became denser and more layered, the emotional stakes grew higher. Episodes like Marge versus the Monorail, a musical satire of con artists and small-town gullibility written by Conan O'Brien, became instant classics. Mr. Plow gave Homer one of his most memorable side careers. Lisa's First Word mixed character-driven storytelling with broad comedy in a way that felt effortless. The show was operating at a level that no animated series had ever reached before. And it was getting better every season. What made the early Simpsons so special was the combination of factors that all came together at the same time. A brilliant writing staff assembled by Sam Simon, a voice cast whose chemistry and talent were unmatched, a network that gave the creators unusual creative freedom, an animation style that, while limited by modern standards, had a warmth and expressiveness that digital animation has never fully recaptured. And a cultural moment where audiences were hungry for something that spoke honestly about American life in all its messy, contradictory, beautiful, and ridiculous reality. The Simpsons gave people permission to laugh at themselves. It showed a family that was dysfunctional but loving, stupid but well-meaning, failing constantly but never giving up. Homer was not a good father by any conventional measure. He was selfish, lazy, impulsive, and sometimes cruel. But he loved his family. He would do anything for them, even if he usually made things worse in the process. That combination of failure and devotion resonated with millions of people who saw their own imperfect families reflected in The Simpsons. The show also gave voice to a kind of working-class experience that was rarely depicted honestly on television. Homer worked at a dangerous job he hated for a boss who despised him because he had a mortgage and 3 kids and no other options. Marge stayed home and held the family together through sheer force of will, suppressing her own ambitions and frustrations because someone had to be the adult. Bart struggled in school because the educational system was not designed for kids like him. Lisa was too smart for her environment and suffered for it. These were not glamorous problems. They were the everyday problems of millions of American families. And The Simpsons treated them with a mixture of empathy and humor that made people feel seen. That is why the show became what it became. Not because it was the funniest show on television, although during its peak years it was. Not because it had the best animation, because it never did, but because it told the truth about a certain kind of American life, and it told that truth in a way that was both devastating and hilarious. The Simpsons showed people the absurdity of their own existence, and instead of making them feel bad about it, the show made them laugh. That is an incredibly rare gift, and it is the reason the show endured long after the jokes became less sharp and the animation became more polished but less soulful. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the Who Shot Mr. Burns saga, the first and only Simpsons cliffhanger, the national guessing game it created, and the controversial answer that divided fans. At the end of Season 6, on the 21st of May, 1995, The Simpsons did something it had never done before and has never done since. It ended the season on a cliffhanger. The episode was called Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 1, and it was one of the most ambitious episodes the show had ever attempted. The episode built up a mystery throughout its runtime. Mr. Burns, Springfield's wealthiest and most despised citizen, who had spent the episode executing a scheme to block out the sun, depriving the entire town of natural light so that they would be forced to use more electricity from his nuclear power plant. This plan angered virtually every resident of Springfield, each of whom had a personal reason to want Burns dead. Homer was angry because Burns could never remember his name. Bart was angry because Burns had injured his dog, Santa's little helper. Lisa was angry because Burns's oil drilling had destroyed a natural spring beneath the school. Moe was angry because his bar was affected. Barney was angry because Burns had destroyed his favorite tavern. Grandpa Simpson was angry because Burns' drilling had disrupted the retirement home. Even Smithers, Burns' loyal assistant, who had turned against his boss because the sun-blocking scheme was too evil even for him. At the end of the episode, Burns stumbles into the town square, wounded. He collapses against the sundial. Someone has shot him. The camera pulls back to reveal his body on the ground, and the episode ends. Who shot Mr. Burns? The question became a national obsession. Fox promoted the mystery aggressively over the summer of 1995, turning it into one of the earliest examples of a television event driven by audience participation. The network created a dedicated hotline and a contest encouraging viewers to guess the culprit. Fox even produced a special called Springfield's Most Wanted, styled after America's Most Wanted, that reviewed the clues and suspects. The mystery dominated water cooler conversations across the country. And newspapers published speculation pieces. Fan theories circulated through early internet forums and bulletin boards. Remember, this was 1995. The internet was in its infancy. There was no social media, no Reddit, no YouTube. And yet the mystery still generated the kind of buzz that modern shows spend millions of marketing dollars trying to achieve. The resolution came on the 17th of September, 1995, in the Season 7 premiere, Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 2. After an episode-long investigation that parodied classic mystery narratives, the culprit was revealed to be baby Maggie Simpson. Maggie had shot Burns accidentally when he tried to take her lollipop. His gun fell, Maggie caught it, and the gun discharged, hitting Burns. The reveal divided fans. Some found it brilliant, arguing that making Maggie the shooter was the most unexpected and therefore most satisfying answer. Others felt cheated, arguing that having a baby be the culprit was an anti-climax after months of buildup, and that it violated the implicit promise that the mystery would have a dramatic, meaningful resolution. The show's writers later acknowledged that the reveal was deliberately designed to subvert expectations. They did not want a conventional mystery resolution because The Simpsons is not a conventional mystery show. The joke was that the entire town had motive and opportunity, but the person who actually pulled the trigger was the one person nobody would ever suspect because she was an infant who could not form intent. The Who Shot Mr. Burns two-parter remains one of the most famous episodes in the show's history, and the cliffhanger between seasons is still the only one The Simpsons has ever done. The show learned from the experience that its strength lies in standalone episodes rather than serialized storytelling. The Simpsons is designed to be dropped into at any point. You can watch virtually any episode without needing to know what happened in the episode before it. That episodic structure is part of what has allowed the show to run for 37 seasons without continuity becoming unmanageable. Each episode is its own self-contained world, and when the credits roll, Springfield resets. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have The Principal and the Pauper, the episode that many fans believe broke The Simpsons forever, and why a single creative decision in Season 9 is still debated more than 25 years later. On the 28th of September, 1997, The Simpsons aired the second episode of Season 9. It was called The Principal and the Pauper, and it would become one of the most controversial episodes in the show's history. Not controversial because it was offensive or inappropriate, but controversial because of what it did to a beloved character's backstory. The episode reveals that the man the town of Springfield has known as Seymour Skinner, the uptight, well-meaning, slightly pathetic principal of Springfield Elementary School, is not actually Seymour Skinner. His real name is Armin Tamzarian. He is a former street punk from Capital City who served in the Vietnam War alongside the real Seymour Skinner. When the real Skinner was believed killed in action, Tamzarian returned home and assumed his identity, eventually becoming the principal that the townspeople know and love. When the real Seymour Skinner shows up alive, the imposter secret is exposed. The town must decide what to do. In the end, the real Skinner is sent away on a train, and the town agrees to continue pretending that Tamzarian is Skinner, essentially choosing the lie over the truth because the lie is more comfortable. Judge Snyder even issues a legal decree that no one in Springfield is allowed to mention the deception again under penalty of torture. The episode was meant to be a commentary on identity and how communities construct shared fictions. But fans and critics saw it differently. They saw it as a fundamental betrayal of a character who had been carefully developed over 8 seasons. Skinner's backstory, his complicated relationship with his overbearing mother Agnes, his Vietnam War experience, his awkward dignity, his perpetual failure, all of it had been established through years of careful writing. The Principal and the Pauper retroactively made all of that backstory meaningless by revealing that the man we thought was Skinner was actually someone else entirely. Harry Shearer, who voices Skinner, has been publicly critical of the episode. He considered the premise a fundamental mistake and a betrayal of what had been built. Matt Groening has also expressed dissatisfaction, reportedly calling the episode a mistake. Many longtime viewers and critics point to The Principal and the Pauper as the moment when The Simpsons began prioritizing shock value and gimmick storylines over character integrity and emotional truth. Whether the principal and the pauper actually caused the show's decline or simply coincided with it is debatable. The show was already beginning to change during season 9 under showrunner Mike Scully. Plots were becoming more outlandish. Homer was becoming more reckless and selfish. The careful balance between comedy and emotion that defined the Golden Age was shifting toward broader humor and wilder premises. The principal and the pauper became a symbol of that shift, a convenient marker that fans could point to and say, "This is where it went wrong." The episode is frequently cited in discussions about the show's quality decline. It appears on nearly every Worst Simpsons episodes list. It has been referenced within the show itself, most notably in Behind the Laughter, the season 11 mockumentary episode, which mentions gimmicky episodes like The Principal and the Pauper as contributing to the fictional behind-the-scenes decline of the show. The fact that the show acknowledged its own misstep, even indirectly, suggests that the creative team understood the damage the episode had caused. 25 years later, The Principal and the Pauper remains a sore spot for fans who lived through the transition from the Golden Age to the decline era. The episode did not kill The Simpsons. The show continued for decades after it aired and produced many more good episodes along the way, but it cracked something. It showed that the writers were willing to sacrifice years of character development for a single episode's premise, and that willingness would become more pronounced in the seasons that followed. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the crossover episodes, the times The Simpsons collided with other shows, and the results that range from brilliant to deeply controversial. Over its 37-year run, The Simpsons has crossed over with several other major television properties, each time creating episodes that generated significant attention and debate among fans of both franchises involved. The earliest notable crossover was with The Critic, a short-lived animated series created by Al Jean and Mike Rice, who had served as showrunners on The Simpsons during seasons 3 and 4. In the season 6 episode A Star Is Burns, the main character of The Critic, film critic Jay Sherman, voiced by John Lovitz, visits Springfield to serve as a judge at a local film festival. The episode was competently made and featured some funny moments, but it became notable for a very different reason. Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, publicly disavowed the episode. Groening objected to what he saw as the use of The Simpsons to promote another show. He felt that the crossover compromised the integrity of his series by turning it into a marketing vehicle for a different program. Groening asked to have his name removed from the episode's credits, though this request was reportedly not honored. The incident revealed tensions between Groening's vision for the show and the decisions made by other producers and executives. A much more successful crossover came in Season 8 with the Springfield Files, which brought FBI agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully from the X-Files to Springfield. David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, the stars of the X-Files, provided their own voices for the episode. The premise involved Homer spotting a glowing alien in the woods near Springfield, leading to an investigation by the two federal agents. The episode was widely praised for capturing the tone and atmosphere of the X-Files while filtering it through the absurdist lens of Springfield. Leonard Nimoy also appeared as himself in the episode, serving as an unreliable narrator. The Springfield Files is generally considered one of the best episodes of Season 8 and one of the finest crossover episodes in television history. The most controversial crossover came in 2014, and though it was technically not a Simpsons episode at all. The Simpsons Guy was the Season 13 premiere of Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane's animated series that had been frequently compared to and accused of copying The Simpsons since its debut in 1999. In the hour-long crossover episode, the Griffin family from Family Guy drives to Springfield after fleeing their hometown of Quahog. The two families meet, and the episode explores the similarities and differences between the two shows. The episode featured an extended fight scene between Homer and Peter Griffin that was both brutal and comedic, spanning multiple Springfield locations and lasting several minutes. It also included pointed jokes about Family Guy's reputation as a Simpsons derivative, with Bart teaching Stewie his prank call technique, and Homer and Peter debating which show's beer is better. The episode drew massive ratings but deeply divided fans. Many Simpsons loyalists felt that the crossover legitimized what they saw as an inferior show, while Family Guy fans enjoyed seeing the two properties interact. The creative teams of both shows reportedly had a productive working relationship during production, but the episode remains a point of contention among fans of both franchises. In the same year, The Simpsons produced its own crossover episode with Futurama, the other animated series created by Matt Groening. The episode, called Simpsorama, aired on the 9th of November 2014 as the 6th episode of season 26. In it, the Planet Express crew from Futurama travels back in time to present-day Springfield to prevent a catastrophe that threatens the future. The episode featured the voice cast of Futurama reprising their roles and was generally well received as a fun, fan-pleasing event that didn't take itself too seriously. Because both shows were created by Groening, the crossover had a family reunion quality that the Family Guy crossover lacked. These crossover episodes illustrate the unique position The Simpsons occupies in the animated television landscape. It is the show that everyone else is measured against. When Family Guy crosses over with The Simpsons, it is a challenger approaching the champion. When Futurama crosses over, it is a sibling visiting from a different city. When The X-Files crosses over, it is a prestige drama lending its credibility to an animated comedy and discovering that the comedy is every bit its equal. The Simpsons does not need crossovers to validate its place in television history, but when it participates in them, the dynamics always center on The Simpsons as the gravitational force around which the other properties orbit. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the voice cast and the superhuman workload of the 6 people who bring Springfield to life. One of the most remarkable aspects of The Simpsons production is how few people are responsible for voicing the vast majority of its characters. The show has a principal cast of 6 actors, and between them they voice virtually every character who appears on a regular basis. The range and stamina required to maintain this across 37 seasons is extraordinary and deserves examination. Dan Castellaneta voices Homer Simpson, the show's central character. But Homer is just the beginning. Castellaneta also voices Grandpa Abraham Simpson, Krusty the Clown, Barney Gumble, Groundskeeper Willie, Mayor Quimby, Sideshow Mel, Hans Moleman, Itchy, Kodos, Gil Gunderson, the squeaky-voiced teen, and over 30 additional characters. He holds the record for voicing the most characters on the show. Each of these characters has a distinct voice, personality, and comedic rhythm. Switching between Homer's dopey baritone, Krusty's raspy showman delivery, Willie's thick Scottish brogue, and Grandpa's quavering elderly voice, sometimes in the same recording session, which requires a level of vocal dexterity that few performers in any medium can match. Julie Kavner voices Marge Simpson, whose distinctive gravelly voice is one of the most recognizable sounds in television. Kavner also voices Marge's sisters Patty and Selma Bouvier and their mother Jacqueline Bouvier. Kavner is famously private about her work on the show. Her contract reportedly includes a stipulation that she does not have to perform her character voices on camera or in public appearances. This means that unlike most celebrity voice actors, Kavner has maintained a separation between her own public identity and the character she has played for over 35 years. Nancy Cartwright voices Bart Simpson, where she originally auditioned for the role of Lisa, but switched to Bart during her audition when she felt a stronger connection to the character. Cartwright also voices Nelson Muntz, Ralph Wiggum, Todd Flanders, Kearney, Database, and occasional noises and words for Maggie Simpson. The fact that a woman voices Bart Simpson is one of the show's most well-known behind-the-scenes details, and Cartwright's performance has been so consistent over 37 seasons that Bart's voice sounds essentially the same today as it did in 1989. Yeardley Smith voices Lisa Simpson and is unique among the principal cast in that she primarily voices only one character. While the other 5 actors each juggle dozens of roles, Smith focuses almost entirely on Lisa, pouring her energy into giving Springfield's most intelligent and morally complex character a voice that conveys both precociousness and vulnerability. Smith's voice is also arguably the closest to her natural speaking voice among the cast members, though she raises her pitch slightly to capture Lisa's youth. Hank Azaria joined the cast in season 2 and quickly became one of the show's most important performers. His roster of characters includes Mo Sislak, Chief Wiggum, Comic Book Guy, Professor Frink, Dr. Nick Riviera, Snake Jailbird, Bumblebee Man, Cletus Spuckler, Superintendent Chalmers, the Sea Captain, and formerly Apu, Nahasa Pima Petalon, Carl Carlson, and Officer Lou before he stepped back from those roles in 2020. Azaria's ability to create instantly recognizable and distinct voices for each of these characters is staggering. Moe's cynical bartender growl sounds nothing like Wiggum's dopey authority figure voice, which sounds nothing like Comic Book Guy's condescending nasality, which sounds nothing like Frink's manic inventor babble. Each voice is a fully realized character, and Azaria maintains them all simultaneously across recording sessions that may require him to switch between 5 or 6 different characters in the space of a few minutes. Harry Shearer, born in 1943, is the eldest member of the principal cast and arguably the one with the most diverse roster of characters. Shearer voices Mr. Burns, Waylon Smithers, Ned Flanders, Principal Skinner, Kent Brockman, Reverend Lovejoy, Lenny Leonard, Otto Mann, Scratchy, Rainier Wolfcastle, and Kang, among many others. The relationship between Burns and Smithers alone requires Shearer to play 2 characters who are in virtually every scene together, switching between the ancient, frail villain and his devoted, anxious assistant within the same lines of dialogue. Shearer brings each character to life with such distinction that viewers rarely think about the fact that one person is performing both sides of these conversations. Every main cast member has won at least one Emmy Award for outstanding voiceover performance. Castellaneta and Azaria have each won 4. The cast's collective achievement is a testament to the depth of talent that the show attracted in its earliest days and has retained ever since. The workload these 6 actors have sustained is, when you think about it in totality, almost incomprehensible. Over 800 episodes. With 37 seasons, 35 years, each episode requires hours of recording. Each recording session involves performing multiple characters with distinct voices, often in scenes where 2 or 3 characters voiced by the same actor are having a conversation with each other. The actors have done this week after week, year after year, for longer than many people's entire careers in any field. The Simpsons voice cast has not just worked on the show for a long time. They have performed at an elite level for a long time, and the consistency of their work across decades is one of the most underappreciated achievements in the history of performance. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the darker side of Springfield's regular episodes, or the moments where the show dropped the comedy and showed you something genuinely painful without the safety net of a Treehouse of Horror non-canon disclaimer. We have talked about the Treehouse episodes and how they allow the show to explore darkness through the lens of non-canon horror. But some of the most disturbing moments in The Simpsons' history happen in regular episodes, in the main continuity, with permanent consequences. The episode "And Maggie Makes 3" from season 6 is often cited as the saddest episode in the show's history. In it, Marge explains to Bart and Lisa why there are no photos of Maggie in the family photo album. The answer is that when Marge became pregnant with Maggie, Homer had just achieved his lifelong dream of quitting his job at the nuclear power plant and working at a bowling alley. The pregnancy meant he could no longer afford the bowling alley job and had to return to the power plant. a place he despised. Homer went back to work, defeated and miserable, and Mr. Burns installed a plaque in front of his workstation that read, "Don't forget, you're here forever." The episode's final reveal shows that Homer has covered the plaque with photos of Maggie, so that the words now read, "Do it for her." The scene is played completely straight, with no jokes, just a quiet moment of a father's love for his daughter transforming a symbol of despair into a symbol of purpose. It is one of the most emotionally devastating moments in the history of animated television. Mother Simpson from Season 7 explores Homer's relationship with his long-absent mother, Mona Simpson, who abandoned the family when Homer was a child. Mona was a political activist who went on the run from the law after participating in a protest that accidentally destroyed Mr. Burns' germ warfare laboratory. The episode reunites Homer and Mona, only to have her leave again at the end when the authorities close in. The final scene shows Homer sitting alone on the hood of his car, watching the stars, after his mother has disappeared into the night once more. The scene runs in silence, with no dialogue and no music, just Homer alone with his pain. The episode explores the wound of parental abandonment with a rawness that most live-action dramas do not achieve. Lisa's substitute from Season 2 features a substitute teacher named Mr. Bergstrom, voiced by Dustin Hoffman under the pseudonym Sam Edick. Mr. Bergstrom is everything Lisa has been looking for in a mentor, an intelligent, passionate, a caring adult who takes her seriously and challenges her intellectually. When her regular teacher returns and Mr. Bergstrom leaves, Lisa is devastated. She chases him to the train station and begs him not to go. He gives her a note that reads, "You are Lisa Simpson." The message is that she does not need him. She already has everything she needs within herself. Lisa walks away crying, clutching the note. The episode is a quietly brutal examination of the pain of losing someone who understands you, and the fact that it is told through the eyes of an 8-year-old makes it even more affecting. One Last Fling from Season 19 depicts Mona Simpson's final return and death. Homer's mother comes back to Springfield one last time, and this time she does not leave. She dies. The episode shows Homer processing his mother's death and coming to terms with the relationship they never had. It is a continuation of the emotional thread started in Mother Simpson 12 seasons earlier, and it closes that chapter with finality and sadness. These episodes share a common quality that sets them apart from the show's typical comedic fare. They trust the audience to sit with difficult emotions. They do not rush to a punchline. They do not undercut the sadness with a joke. They allow their characters to feel pain, and they ask the viewer to feel it with them. In a show that is primarily known for making people laugh, these moments of genuine emotional devastation are all the more powerful because they are unexpected. You turn on The Simpsons expecting to be entertained, and instead you are gutted by a scene of a man sitting alone on a car hood staring at stars because his mother left him again. The Simpsons has always had this capacity for darkness hiding beneath its bright yellow surface. The comedy draws you in. The satire keeps you engaged. But the emotional moments are what stay with you long after the episode ends. They are the reason the show means more to people than just a collection of funny jokes. They are the reason people still tear up watching And Maggie Makes 3 30 years after it aired. They are the soul of The Simpsons, and they are what separates it from every other animated comedy that has tried to replicate its success. And that brings us to the end of this video. The Simpsons has been on the air since the 17th of December, 1989. It has produced over 800 episodes across 37 seasons. It has survived the murder of a beloved voice actor, pay disputes that nearly destroyed it, cultural controversies that forced it to reckon with its own legacy, the firing of its longtime composer, the removal of one of its own episodes from circulation, the departure of its co-creator, the decline of its audience, and the endless debate about whether it should still be on the air. Through all of that, the show continues. New episodes air every season. The machine keeps running. Springfield keeps existing. Homer still goes to work at the power plant. Bart still writes on the chalkboard. Lisa still plays her saxophone. Marge still holds the family together. And Maggie still does not say a word. The Simpsons is the longest-running American sitcom in history. It holds more records than any other animated series. It has made more money than most entertainment franchises in any medium. It has influenced every animated comedy that came after it. And it has given the world a family that, for all their flaws and failures, feels as real as any family on television. Whether it should keep going is a question that everyone has an opinion about and nobody can answer definitively. But the fact that it has kept going for this long, through everything, is itself one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of entertainment. The Simpsons is not just a show, it is a monument. A 37-year-old, 800-episode monument to the power of animation, comedy, storytelling, and a family of 5 yellow cartoon characters who somehow became part of the fabric of the real world. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Actually, before we close out completely, there are a few more disturbing facts that deserve their own spotlight. Let's keep going. Moving on, we have how The Simpsons essentially built the Fox network and what that means about the relationship between a show and the corporation that owns it. When The Simpsons premiered in December 1989, the Fox Broadcasting Company was barely 3 years old. It was the 4th broadcast network in the United States, competing against the established giants of ABC, NBC, and CBS. Fox had launched in October 1986 with limited programming and a small affiliate base. It was widely considered a scrappy underdog, a network that might not survive. The Simpsons changed that. The show's massive ratings during its first several seasons gave Fox a tentpole program that attracted viewers and demographics the network desperately needed, particularly young adults and teenagers. Season 1 of The Simpsons was the first Fox series to rank among the top 30 most-watched shows in all of American television. By Season 3, the show was routinely winning its time slot. The massive cultural phenomenon of Simpson mania generated attention for the Fox network that money could not buy. People tuned into Fox on Sunday nights specifically to watch The Simpsons, and while they were there, they saw promos for other Fox shows. The Simpsons served as the foundation upon which Fox built its entire primetime schedule. By 2017, The Simpsons was still the anchor of Fox's animation domination lineup on Sunday nights, surrounded by Family Guy, Bob's Burgers, and other animated comedies. The show ranked as television's #1 comedy among millennials across all of television, outperforming major network shows like The Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, and Saturday Night Live among adults aged 18 to 24 and 18 to 34. Christina Miller, who was president of Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and Boomerang at the time, described The Simpsons as what a modern-day hit looks like across multiple screens and multiple touchpoints. The irony of the show's relationship with Fox is profound. The Simpsons built the network. Without The Simpsons, Fox might have folded in the early 1990s like dozens of other attempted fourth networks before it. And yet Fox has repeatedly fought its own star attraction over money, and threatening to cancel it in 2011, refusing to pay supporting voice actress Maggie Roswell $4,000 in 1999, and demanding 45% pay cuts from the cast that made the show possible. The network that The Simpsons created has spent decades trying to pay The Simpsons as little as possible for creating it. That dynamic says everything you need to know about the economics of the entertainment industry. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the Writers Guild of America strikes and how labor disputes have repeatedly shaped what The Simpsons could and could not do. The show has been directly affected by 2 major writers' strikes during its run, and both disrupted production in ways that left visible marks on the seasons they touched. The first was the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike, which lasted 100 days from November 2007 to February 2008. The strike affected the production of Season 19, which was shortened to 20 episodes instead of the usual count. Because animated shows like The Simpsons work on long lead times, with episodes taking approximately 6 months from script to screen, the impact of the strike was somewhat buffered compared to live-action shows that produce episodes much more quickly. The writing staff had completed scripts for several episodes before the strike began, and those scripts were already in various stages of animation production. However, the strike prevented new scripts from being written, which meant the back half of Season 19's production was disrupted. Episodes that would have been part of the season were pushed to Season 20 or abandoned entirely. The second strike came in 2023 when the Writers Guild of America again went on strike, this time in a dispute centered largely around the impact of artificial intelligence on writing jobs and the economics of streaming television. The 2023 strike affected Season 35, which was reduced to 18 episodes. Again, the long lead time of animated production provided some insulation. Episodes that had been written and were already in the animation pipeline continued through production during the strike. But the writing of new episodes was halted, and the reduced episode count was the most visible consequence for viewers. These strikes are part of a broader story about labor in the entertainment industry that The Simpsons has been caught up in repeatedly. The salary disputes between the voice cast and Fox are one dimension of this story. The writers' strikes are another. The firing of Alf Clausen for cost reasons is yet another. At every level, the people who create The Simpsons have had to fight for fair compensation and working conditions, while the corporations that profit from their work have pushed back relentlessly. The show's own themes of working-class struggle and institutional indifference are mirrored in the real-world dynamics of its production. Homer Simpson fights Mr. Burns for respect and fair treatment at the nuclear plant. Dan Castellaneta, the man who voices Homer, fights Fox for fair compensation and profit sharing. The parallel is almost too perfect. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the curious and often dark history of how The Simpsons handles the concept of death within its own universe. We touched on this earlier with the list of characters who have been permanently killed off, but there is a deeper pattern worth examining. The Simpsons occupies a unique position among long-running television shows when it comes to death. The show exists in a state of floating timeline where the characters do not age. Bart has been 10 years old since 1989. Lisa has been 8. Homer and Marge have been in their mid-30s for over 3 decades. Time does not pass in Springfield in any consistent way. The seasons change, holidays come and go, but the characters remain frozen in place. And yet people die. Real, permanent, irreversible death exists in Springfield alongside the complete absence of aging. This creates a strange and unsettling dynamic. The citizens of Springfield are immortal in the sense that they do not grow old, but they are mortal in the sense that they can be killed at any time by accidents, illness, or violence. Maud Flanders can be knocked off a bleacher and die forever, but her sons Todd and Rod will never grow up. Edna Krabappel can be retired permanently following her voice actress's death, but Bart will never graduate from her 4th grade class because Bart will never turn 11. This combination of timelessness and mortality gives death on The Simpsons a particular weight. When a character dies, they are removed from a world that otherwise never changes. Everyone else continues exactly as they were, but the dead character is gone. There is no natural endpoint to anyone's story. Nobody retires, nobody moves away permanently, nobody grows old and passes peacefully. Death comes suddenly, randomly, and it creates a hole in a world that has no mechanism for filling it. Maud's absence is permanent in a way that is more absolute than death in a show with a normal timeline. Because in a show with a normal timeline, the other characters would eventually move on, age, and die themselves. In Springfield, everyone else stays exactly the same, and the empty space where Maud used to stand remains empty for eternity. This is part of what makes the show's handling of real-world voice actor deaths so poignant. When Marcia Wallace died and Edna Krabappel was retired, the character was removed from a world that will never end. Bart will sit in a classroom without his teacher forever. Ned Flanders will live next door to a house where Maud used to be forever. The school will have a chalkboard that no one writes detention assignments on forever. The Simpsons' refusal to age its characters means that the absence of the dead is felt more acutely with every passing year, because the world they left never moves past the moment they were lost. There is something deeply melancholic about this when you think about it long enough. The Simpsons is a comedy. It is designed to make people laugh, but built into its fundamental structure in the combination of a floating timeline and permanent death is a mechanism for creating a very specific kind of sadness. A sadness that accumulates slowly over decades as more and more characters are removed from a world that refuses to change. Springfield in season 37 looks almost identical to Springfield in season 1, but Troy McClure is not there. Lionel Hutz is not there, Maud Flanders is not there, Edna Krabappel is not there, Frank Grimes is not there, Bleeding Gums Murphy is not there, Mona Simpson is not there, Phil Hartman is not there, Marcia Wallace is not there, Russi Taylor is not there. The town looks the same, but it is emptier than it used to be, and it will keep getting emptier as the years go on. That is the final disturbing fact about The Simpsons. The show will outlive more of the people who made it. The characters will keep existing in their frozen yellow world long after the last original voice actor has passed away, long after the last Golden Age writer has retired, long after everyone who remembers what it was like to watch the premiere episode on a December night in 1989 is gone. The Simpsons is not just a show anymore, it is a self-perpetuating institution. And institutions do not grieve. They continue, and the ghosts of the people who built them walk the halls in silence, present in the credits but absent from the world, remembered by the work they left behind but unable to create anything new. That is what 37 years of a television show looks like when you examine it closely. Not just 800 episodes and $13 billion and 33 million viewers at its peak, but also the people who died, the voices that went silent, the characters who disappeared, the compromises that were made, the money that was fought over, and the slow and a steady accumulation of loss that sits underneath one of the funniest and most beloved shows ever created. The Simpsons is the greatest animated series in television history. It is also one of the saddest stories in television history. Both things are true at the same time. And that is what makes it so endlessly fascinating, so deeply human, and so impossible to stop thinking about once you start looking beneath the surface. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Wait, actually, there is one more thing worth covering before we truly close this out. We have the crossover between animation and real life that happens when a show runs long enough to become embedded in the actual fabric of society. The Simpsons has been referenced by world leaders, quoted in academic papers, as analyzed in university courses, and used as a lens through which to examine everything from American politics to family dynamics to the philosophy of ethics. The show has been the subject of dozens of published books, including works with titles like The Simpsons and Philosophy, Planet Simpson, and Springfield Confidential. Professors at institutions around the world have taught courses centered entirely on The Simpsons, using episodes as primary text for discussions about media, culture, politics, and religion. When a cartoon becomes college curriculum, something extraordinary has happened. The show's impact on language alone would fill an entire linguistics dissertation. Beyond DO, which was added to the Oxford English Dictionary, The Simpsons has introduced or popularized dozens of words and phrases that have entered everyday conversation. Cromulent and embiggen are used unironically in serious writing. Worst episode ever became the standard internet phrase for expressing disappointment with any media, not just The Simpsons. Don't have a cow entered the lexicon of every English-speaking child in the early 1990s. The show's catchphrases, from eat my shorts to excellent to haha to won't somebody please think of the children, are referenced constantly in contexts that have nothing to do with the show itself. The Simpsons has become a shared language, a set of references that millions of people carry in their heads and deploy in conversation without even thinking about where the phrases came from. The show has also shaped how people think about the town they live in. There are dozens of real towns called Springfield across the United States, and the show's creators have always refused to specify which state Springfield is in. This was a deliberate choice made early in the show's development. By keeping Springfield's location ambiguous, the writers ensured that every viewer could imagine the show taking place in their own version of small-town America. Matt Groening has said that he chose the name Springfield precisely because it is one of the most common city names in the country. The result is that The Simpsons' Springfield belongs to everyone and nowhere simultaneously, a fictional every town that reflects the universal American experience of living in a place that is too small to be important but too familiar to leave. The religious dimensions of the show are worth noting as well. The Simpsons is one of the few primetime television shows that depicts its characters attending church regularly. The Simpson family goes to church almost every Sunday, and religious themes are woven throughout the series. Homer has spoken directly to God in multiple episodes. Reverend Lovejoy serves as both a spiritual leader and a satirical target. Ned Flanders represents sincere, earnest Christianity taken to its logical extreme. Lisa has explored Buddhism. The show treats religion with a mixture of affection and skepticism that reflects how most Americans actually feel about faith. They believe in something but are not entirely sure what, and they are suspicious of anyone who claims to have all the answers. Academic Mark Pinsky wrote an entire book called The Gospel According to The Simpsons, arguing that the show is one of the most theologically literate programs in television history. The show has been praised by religious commentators for taking faith seriously, even while satirizing organized religion. It has also been criticized by some religious groups for mocking church attendance and depicting God as a character who can be bargained with and questioned. This tension is between sincere engagement with spiritual themes and irreverent comedy about religious institutions is one of the show's most distinctive qualities. The educational impact of the show is also significant and often overlooked. Millions of Americans learned about topics ranging from the Electoral College to nuclear physics to classical music to literary criticism through Simpsons episodes. The show's writers frequently embedded real information into their comedy. An episode about Lisa becoming a vegetarian was factually accurate about the nutritional and ethical arguments for vegetarianism. An episode about Homer going to space accurately depicted several aspects of NASA's training program and zero-gravity environment. An episode about Bart getting an F explored the psychology of test anxiety and academic failure with surprising nuance. The show educated its audience while entertaining them, and it did so without ever feeling like it was trying to teach. The format-breaking episodes deserve a final mention as well. The Simpsons has experimented with its own form more than almost any other television show. The episode 22 short films about Springfield from season 7 abandoned the traditional A-plot and B-plot structure entirely, instead presenting a series of vignettes following different Springfield residents through a single day. This episode produced the famous Steamed Hams sketch in which Principal Skinner invites Superintendent Chalmers to lunch and serves him fast food while claiming it is his own cooking, which has become one of the most memed and remixed pieces of television in internet history. The segment has been reimagined as a horror film, a musical, an anime, a video game, and hundreds of other formats by fans who discovered it decades after it originally aired. Trilogy of Error from season 12 told 3 interconnected storylines, Rashomon style, showing the same day from 3 different perspectives that all link together. Behind the Laughter from Season 11 presented The Simpsons as real actors in a VH1 behind the music-style mockumentary, breaking the fourth wall entirely. Homer Cubed, a segment from the Season 7 Treehouse of Horror, featured pioneering three-dimensional CGI animation in 1995, years before CGI became standard in animated production. Brick Like Me from Season 25 animated the entire episode in Lego style. Eternal Moonshine of the Simpson Mind used fragmented memory loss storytelling. These experiments showed that the show was never content to simply repeat its formula. Even in its later seasons, when the overall quality of the writing had declined from its peak, where the show continued to push the boundaries of what an animated sitcom could be. The Simpsons has earned 187 award wins and 382 nominations across all ceremonies as of early 2026. It has won multiple Peabody Awards. It has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one of very few animated characters to receive that honor. It has been named the greatest television show of all time by multiple publications. Time magazine named it the best television show of the 20th century. Entertainment Weekly has repeatedly ranked it among the finest programs ever produced in any format. These accolades are not participation trophies. They reflect the genuine excellence of a show that, at its best, was the smartest, funniest, most emotionally resonant, and most culturally significant program on American television. The fact that the show is no longer at its best does not erase what it achieved during the years when it was. Those episodes still exist. They are still available. They are still being watched by millions of people every day, and they are still as good as they ever were. The Simpsons is a show about a family, an imperfect, dysfunctional, loving, stupid, brave, selfish, generous, flawed, and fundamentally decent family that has been trying to figure out how to live together in a complicated world for over 35 years. That is all it has ever been, and that is why it matters. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. And one final thought to close this video out completely. There is a moment in the Season 8 episode El Viaje Misterioso de Nuestro Homer, which translates to The Mysterious Voyage of Homer, where Homer eats several Guatemalan insanity peppers at the annual Springfield Chili Cook-Off, and hallucinates an entire journey through a desert landscape guided by a mystical coyote, voiced by Johnny Cash. Yes, that Johnny Cash. The man in black himself voicing a spiritual guide for Homer Simpson in a cartoon about peppers. During the hallucination, the coyote tells Homer to find his soulmate. Homer assumes the coyote means Marge, but the coyote questions this assumption. When the hallucination ends, Homer wakes up on a golf course, disoriented and confused. He spends the rest of the episode questioning whether Marge is really his soulmate, searching Springfield for someone who truly understands him. He goes to Moe's Tavern. He answers a personal ad. He visits a lighthouse, hoping to befriend the loneliest person in town. When he gets to the lighthouse, he discovers it is operated not by a person, but by a machine called EARL, which stands for Electronic, Automatic, Robotic Lighthouse. There is no human there. Homer's search for connection leads him to an empty building run by a machine. Marge arrives, they fix the lighthouse together and save a ship that is about to run aground. They reconcile. Homer decides that Marge is his soulmate after all. The episode ends with the entire town showing up to collect free hot pants from the shipwreck, while everyone sings the 1958 song Short Shorts by the Royal Teens. This episode is The Simpsons in miniature. It starts with a silly premise. Homer eats peppers that are too hot. It escalates into something surreal and genuinely philosophical. A man questioning whether the person he married is the right person. It features a transcendent guest performance from one of the most iconic musicians in American history, Johnny Cash, who brings quiet gravitas to a talking coyote in a cartoon desert. It grapples with loneliness, identity, and the nature of love. And then it resolves with a shipwreck full of hot pants and a town singing a novelty song from the 1950s. That is what The Simpsons does. It takes you from the mundane to the transcendent and back to the absurd in the span of 22 minutes. It makes you think about the meaning of life while Homer is covered in chili. It makes you cry while an animated man looks at photos of his baby daughter taped to a wall. It makes you laugh at a funeral for a man who was killed by the universe's refusal to play by the same rules for everyone. No other show does this. No other show has ever done this. And no other show will ever do this for as long as The Simpsons has done it, because no other show will ever run for this long. The Simpsons is a one-time event in the history of human storytelling. It cannot be repeated. It can only be watched, discussed, argued about, loved, criticized, quoted, memed, streamed, and remembered. 37 seasons, over 800 episodes, over 35 years. More than 800 guest stars, 154 writers, 6 voice actors carrying an entire universe on their vocal cords. Billions of dollars earned, billions of hours watched, dozens of characters killed and mourned. A handful of real people lost along the way, their voices preserved forever in episodes that will outlive us all. The Simpsons is the longest story ever told on American television. And somewhere in Springfield, which could be anywhere in America, Homer Simpson is sitting on his couch, watching television, eating a donut, and not thinking about any of this. Because Homer does not think about legacies or records or cultural significance. Homer thinks about donuts and beer and whether Marge is happy and whether Bart is going to get in trouble again and whether Maggie needs a new pacifier. That is why the show works. That is why it has always worked. Because underneath the records and the controversies and the billions of dollars, The Simpsons is about a man sitting on a couch with his family, trying to get through another day. And that is something everyone can understand, whether you first watched the show in 1989 or discovered it on Disney Plus last week. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're a true fan. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you in the next one. One last thing. If you're listening to this video as you fall asleep, which is exactly what it was designed for, here is something to think about as you drift off. Somewhere in a recording studio in Los Angeles, Dan Castellaneta is warming up his voice, getting ready to say something stupid as Homer Simpson for the 800th and somethingth time. Julie Kavner is sitting with her script, preparing to be the voice of patience and exasperation that is Marge. Nancy Cartwright is about to be a 10-year-old boy again, the same 10-year-old boy she has been for 35 years. Yeardley Smith is about to give Lisa another moment of brilliance or heartbreak. Hank Azaria is flipping between 6 different characters in his head, each one as real to the audience as any live-action performance. And Harry Shearer, who has been doing this longer than some of you have been alive, is about to make Mr. Burns say excellent one more time. They have been doing this since 1989. They will probably keep doing it for years to come. And every time they step into that recording booth, they add another layer to the longest, strangest, funniest, saddest, most profitable, most controversial, most beloved, and most enduring story in the history of American television. Sleep well. The Simpsons will still be there when you wake up. It always is, and that is everything. 3 hours of disturbing Simpsons facts delivered in one continuous stream for you to fall asleep to. From the murder of Phil Hartman to the show's renewal through season 40, from the $4,000 pay dispute that killed Maude Flanders to the billion hours streamed on Disney Plus, this has been a complete journey through the darkest, strangest, and most fascinating corners of the longest-running animated series in television history. Good night.